Hello there.
Hi.
Hope you're having a wonderful Sunday so far. It was a great drive up here, nice and calm, clear roads, lovely. So my name is Davey, for those of you who don't know or didn't read the poster. And I live in West Sussex, a little town in West Sussex, roughly about a dozen miles north of Brighton. We have a great community down in Sussex, not least of all Hope Sussex, which is an organisation I support quite a lot. They're very good friends of mine. So it's a good community down there, but also it's a good community up north as well. As I've seen online, I've travelled around the country, I've obviously met a lot of people, north, east, south and west. And it fills me with a lot of hope to see so many people standing up for their rights, or at least wanting to learn how to stand up for their rights. So there's different ways, obviously, to stand up for your rights. A lot of you, no doubt, and I know Pete has spoken on Richard Bones before about common law. I know a lot about common law. My beautiful other half, Jess, her uncle is allegedly Dave. So he's taught me an awful lot of common law over the past couple of decades. I've also done a lot of research myself. The only problem I find with common law is that common law, to me, is a utopia. That's the system that we should be living in, right? The system that will be perfect, the system that will protect your rights. But unfortunately, we don't live in that system, right? That's the trouble. We don't live in this perfect utopia of common law. Instead, we live in a system that is completely built upon fraud. Everything in society, and I do mean everything in society. And the reason it's everything in society is, I'm sure many of you know about the Davey Act 1666. That was the ultimate fraud, declaring everybody dead, beyond the seas, presumed dead. Right? So, everything that followed that built the system that we live in, was built upon that Davey Act of 1666. And of course that was a fraud, which means everything that was built upon it is a fraud. So the whole system acts fraudulently, and you're not going to get fair justice, no matter how hard you try. You'll get occasionally lucky, occasionally you'll do quite well, you'll get a result or two. But ultimately, the odds are stacked against you, right? You've got councils who are now implementing new-led zones, about to go all over the country, coming August next week, I believe, in London next week. And so they're trying to tax every single thing you do. Now, of course, the new-led zones, not really about climate change, as we all know. It's about control. It's why they got rid of diesels, or tried to get rid of diesels, or attempted to get rid of diesels, by making up some lie about some computer that's misreporting the emissions. Well, of course, they had to start with diesel, because you can make your own diesel with cooking oil. Use cooking oil. You can make your own diesel. See? So you can cut them out. If they cut off your fuel supply, and you've got a diesel car, right, you can still fuel your car, as long as you do a lot of cooking. Right? So, once, of course, they finally fizzle that out, then it'll be petrol, because you can't easily make your own petrol. You can't refine your own petrol very easily at all. They're already, obviously, forcing us to get electric vehicles. As we all know, that's because only electric vehicles can be controlled remotely, right? So we're all falling into that trap, and we're all paying for this with our council tax. Well, hopefully none of you are. I've never, ever, ever paid a penny of council tax, poll tax, community charge, whatever it used to be called. Okay, and I'm 55 years old, right? Never paid a penny. I've never discussed the issue with the council. Okay? Never discussed it. I've never sent them 3 letters processes, not letters. I've never rang them and said, oh, can we come to an agreement? Or even saying, what you do in chasing me for this debt, prove you won't that I owe it, prove the liability. That's too much effort for me. I'm a very, very busy man. I've got a lot of stuff to do, okay? So I like to make things as simple as possible. In my world, there's not enough hours in the day. I have 3 children at home. The youngest is 8 years old. 2 of my children are autistic. 1 of my children I home educate. And obviously I run Police Officers UK as well. So I haven't got time to send knock letters, nor have I got the energy to send 3 letters, wait for the response, deal with the response. You see, the fundamental rule of life is that the dead and the living cannot communicate with each other, no matter how hard they try. Okay? So, if you're going to talk to a dead entity and respond to their letters, you're then declaring yourself as a dead entity. Okay? You're a bit like Bruce Willis in the film The Sixth Sense, as in you don't realise you're dead. Right? You think you're alive, you think you're being a living being. But of course, you're not. See, under the ZKV Act, right, you need to declare that you are alive. But who do you declare that to? Who? You can only declare it to somebody else who is alive in order for you to be alive. And officially, the last I checked, the only 2 people that are currently alive is the King and Queen of England. Sovereigns, right? The only 2. Good luck getting an audience with them to prove that you're a living being. Anybody else is an agent for the Crown. And if they're an agent for the Crown, they're a dead entity. They have a title, they have a position, they're a dead entity. If you communicate with them and correspond with them, you too are a dead entity. Okay? So, it's the fundamental rule of life. Yeah? The dead and the living cannot speak to each other. And that's how they perpetrate this trick. Okay? They perpetrate the trick by saying, you've got to prove you're alive. There's nobody to prove it to. So therefore, we're going to completely ignore anything you say, and we're going to declare you as dead anyway. You could say, if you get stopped by the police, you could stand there and say, I'm a sovereign being, I'm a living man. Yeah, but you're talking to a dead entity, and you're responding to a dead entity. And even if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to say a word, yeah, just they're going to have to cuff me, put me in, I'm not going to do anything to assist them, help them, I'm not going to speak to them at all throughout the entire process. But as soon as they hand you something, and you take it, like a drink back at the station, you've communicated with the dead. And because you've communicated with the dead, you've now declared yourself as a dead entity, and they can do anything they want to that dead entity. Now, you're indoctrinated, obviously, through school, right? And I'm sure most of you think morning and afternoon registration in school, when they used to shout out your name, to say, here, yeah, was to make sure that everybody is present. But it wasn't. It was to indoctrinate you, to train your brain into answering to a birth trust, to a dead entity, and believing that that dead entity birth trust is you, and you are it. You believe that's your birth trust. That's not yours at all. You're a dead entity. That's not yours at all. If you're a living being, it's got nothing to do with you. Okay? It's got nothing to do with you. Because living beings do not act in commerce at all. If they do, they're not living beings. They're dead entities. We were born and designed to share, to commune, form our communities, and share amongst each other, right? And help each other as a community to help grow. We weren't designed to trade. That was a social construct, okay? So anything at all to do with trade, right, means you're a dead entity. Even if you, as a living being, pay your friend a tenner, you've completed a transaction with something that doesn't exist. Okay? So you have to remember this fundamental principle when dealing with any of these situations. Right? The dead and the living cannot communicate. And if you do communicate, you're dead. Or you're declaring yourself as dead. Now, of course, it's a fraud because the Crown Corporation, the agents of the governments, the councils, etc., they know you're alive. Okay? They can see you, feel you, smell you, hear you, touch you. They know you're alive, but they're pretending like you're not. Okay? Now, they're not all pretending because they're not all aware, obviously, that they've been indoctrinated too. They think that's just how life is. They just think that's nature. This is, a person has a right to profit. Nobody has a right to profit, okay? Unless you're a dead entity, in which case it's all about profit. So, how does this translate into real life? As I say, take council tax. There's no contract, okay? There's no contract between you and the council, right? Your silence is not acquiescence, contrary to popular belief, because that's not how contract law works, okay? It's either a written contract that has the full written consent of the parties involved, or it's a tacit consent contract, such as like in a car park, that says, by your actions you agree, right? So if you park here, you agree to these terms and conditions, right? So that's what your notice is for, your private property no trespassing notice is for. And you've got two of them in this pack, an A4 and an A5. That's a tacit consent contract, right? Now, it's going to be ignored. I can guarantee you, they're going to ignore it, because that's the reality of life, okay? They don't play by the rules, they don't care, because they used to behave in certain manners, they generally forget their manners and their humanity, but then they're not humans, they're dead entities at your door, and they come to rob you, okay? They come to steal from you and your family, and you are the lion that has to stand there and roar and make sure they can't come anywhere near you or your family. So they ignore your notice, but it doesn't matter that they ignore it. It only matters that it's there, okay? Because without a notice, there is always, with all properties throughout the United Kingdom, there is always an implied right of access, which means if you don't have a sign on your property, the local smackhead could walk straight through into your kitchen and not be committing an offence until you tell him to leave, and then he refuses to leave. Then he commits an offence. But anybody can walk into your home unless you've got a sign that says private property, no trespassing. This clearly states who can and who can't trespass, or who is creating the trespass and who isn't. So, of course, you don't want your postman thinking he's trespassing so he doesn't deliver your letters or parcels. So, of course, you exempt him and family and friends, clients, tradesmen and women by appointment. Okay, so they can't just demand an appointment and turn up. They have to make an appointment. An appointment is made between two people. Otherwise, it's just being dictated. It's an interrogation. So, it says at the bottom of this notice, the notice of liability. I'll go through it the little bit. Statutory legislation does not apply. Any violators of this notice may be held liable in their private individual capacity for the sum of not less than £2,500. Now you'll see a lot of these signs around on the internet or for sale places that say like £250,000. Nobody's going to take that seriously. Nobody's going to take £250,000 seriously for a trespass, okay? And it's about being taken seriously at the end of the day. So you need to do numbers that can be obtained, if you really wanted to, in a small claims court. Whereas you can't pursue £250,000 in small claims court, you have to go through a different process. And there's huge fees to pay in order to, because it's staggered depending on how much your claim is for. So, upon raising the attention of the occupants, and raising the attention can be knocking on your door, just walking up your pathway, because they shouldn't be walking up your pathway. If they walked up your pathway and you saw them out the window, they've raised your attention. Okay? They shout through the letterbox, they've raised your attention. And then you can charge them a further £1,000. So that's now $3,500 they owe you. All lawful occupants within this property reserve the right to use physical force in the removal of any violators of this trespass notice. Upon the use of physical force, the trespass violator agrees to pay a fee of not less than £5,000. So physical force is defined as reasonable force. Now, it's not reasonable to dig them with an elbow or poke them in the eye. Okay? It would be a case of sticking your arms out and just walking forward. Just like that. Using your body, if need be, to push them forward off of the boundary of your property. Once they're on the public property, you can't lay a finger on them. Okay? So, they've agreed to this, because this is a contract. And by remaining there, by trespassing, they've agreed to these terms and conditions of this contract. They're saying, yes, okay, I agreed to be liable. So, that's now £8,500 they owe you. Occupants of this private property will not accept any liability or responsibility for the loss or damage to any personal or corporate belongings. Any clamps left attached to any vehicle within the boundaries of this private property shall be removed and disposed of accordingly, and shall incur a fee to the trespass violator of not less than £1,000. So that's now £9,500 underneath the £10,000 threshold for a small claim. Okay? So, they've agreed that if they clamp your car, you can cut it off. You can do it in front of the police if you want to. Although, you know, if you're doing it out of view of everybody else, then you could just plausible deniability. You know, they come back and say, oh, you've damaged our clamp. I said, go away and shut the door. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to answer to that. They've got no proof. But even if they could prove it, doesn't matter. They agreed to it. They tacitly consented to you being able to remove that from the vehicle. They were trespassing, so therefore, because their implied rights of access were removed before they turned up, they knew they were trespassing, they could see the notice, and therefore agreed to those terms. Okay? Now that's in the legal system. That's admiralty law. Okay? And you'll find actually a lot of people try and sort of define the two different laws, common law versus admiralty law. They're both the same thing. Common law is a part of admiralty law. Okay? The Magna Carta was a signed contract between the barons and King John. Right? If it's a signed contract, it's covered by contract law, which is covered by maritime admiralty law. Okay? Also, there were barons and a king. They had titles. Okay? And titles are legal terms. They're identity terms. No living being has a title. Okay? No living being actually has a surname. It's a surety name. Okay? Even if you say, so my full name on the birth certificate is David Paul Stewart. Right? David Paul Stewart. I sometimes refer to myself as Davey Stewart, but I never refer to myself as David Stewart. That's because that's the name of a birth trust. That's different. I only do that if I'm going to benefit from it. Right? I only deal with anything that I'm going to benefit from. If I'm not going to benefit from it, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to entertain it. I'm not going to give it my time, my energy. My time is precious, like I said. So therefore, I need to manage my time. And if you're not going to benefit me or my family or my friends or my community, you're not creating any kind of benefit, I'm not interested in speaking to you. I don't even see you. Okay? So, I don't deal with council tax other than when they come to my door. That's when I deal with them. Right? And it takes me anywhere between 5 and 30 seconds to get rid of them. 30 seconds is the longest. Right? But it's all dependent on how I'm feeling when they knock. Sometimes I'm in a mischievous mood and I'll drag it on for 30 seconds. Yeah. Other times I just can't be bothered or I'm busy. I'll answer the door and I'll just go, nope, and shut the door. Other times I'll open it and well, one time I opened it and he said, I need to talk to you about your council tax. I said, well, I don't want to. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't want to. Simple to understand. Talk about something else if you want. And he said, well, we need to do. I said, no, I'm all right, thanks, fine. I just shut the door. Right? I just didn't have the time or the patience for him. It was just like, no, come again next week maybe. Yeah, if I'm feeling in a mischievous mood, I'll have a bit of fun with him. But I'll waste your time. Yeah? I won't get into any debate about wetting contracts. Yeah? Prove this, prove that. Not interested. I'm not having the conversation. First of all, I'm not going to identify myself. Yeah? I'm not going to say, yes, I'm Mr. David Paul Stewart, and I too would like to talk to you about council tax. No interest in council. I'm not interested in council tax. Doesn't benefit me, so why would I be? And some people say, well, of course it benefits you. You get your bins emptied, for example. Council tax doesn't pay for your bins. The government give them a grant to pay for your bins and for the parks to be trimmed and the streets to be swept and the bins to be emptied. So, council tax pays for the mayor's lunch. And his stretch limo to his events, and the town hall needs a paint job, and roundabouts need flowers on them apparently before you can go around them. Who knew? Right? So that's what your council tax pays for, as well as wars and investments, dodgy investments, ridiculous pay packets, expense accounts. I'm not interested in funding any of that. The council bear no benefit to me whatsoever. If I park my car somewhere, they're on it, trying to issue it a ticket. So why would I want to benefit them? Why would I want to help them? Why would I want to give them an extra starter for their lunch? I've no interest in them. Right? So I don't correspond with them. I don't send them letters. I don't turn up to their fake summonses, their fake courts. Because of course, no council for council tax can get a CCJ against you. Okay? They can't do it. And there's a perfectly simple and logical reason as to why they can't do it. A CCJ is a county court judgment. County courts only deal with breaches of contract. That's it. Just breaches of contract. Right? Well, council tax, there is no contract. So there can't be a breach of a contract. Right? You haven't signed to the terms or agreed in any way to say, yes, I want to pay this, and then defaulted on it. So what they do is they send you a summons. It's not a real summons. First of all, if you're claiming to be a sovereign being, you can't be summoned anyway. You can only summon spirits because they operate in the land of the dead, the realms of the dead entities, corporations, dead speak. Yeah? They only exist in those sort of terms. Right? So they don't benefit me at all, so I ignore them. And when they come to my door, I deal with them. I don't hide behind the sofa. It's the worst thing you can do. First of all, because I'd have to move my sofa. And as I say, I'm a busy man. Right? So, you answer the door. And the reason you answer the door is because you're going to deal with it. Now, your heart may be pounding 10 to the dozen. That's just adrenaline. That doesn't mean you're scared. It's that fight or flight mode. Okay? And you can switch that instantly. It's just about what you say to yourself when it happens. So first of all, they're going to bang on your door. They're not going to tap lightly. They're going to... Hello? There we go. I won't knock again, don't worry. Right, so yeah, they're going to leather on your door, and that's a psychological trick they use, okay? Because it sets you immediately into that natural awareness and adrenaline pumping through the body. And they want you in that vulnerable state, okay? But like I said, you can switch that instantly by immediately seeing them differently. Instead of seeing them as some kind of authority thug, you now just see them as some bloke at your door trying to rob you. And you're not having it. Okay? They're trying to rob you, they're trying to take everything from you, and you're not having it. Right? You then switch your brain instantly into fight mode. Now that doesn't mean open the door, steam out there and knock them out. But what it means is it will give you that much more confidence in dealing with them. Yeah? And your body language will show that. Okay? Because a lot of it is about the communication, is about body language. Now, of course, the easiest way to deal with them is to open the door and just stare at them. Really intensely stare at them. Don't say a word. Not a word. No matter what they say to you, don't say a word, just stare. And then after about 15 to 30 seconds, slowly close the door, but follow it with your eyes. And just shut the door. Now, one of two things will happen, right? Either they're going to say, do you know what, this person's a little bit vulnerable, shall we say, for want of a better word. In which case, we can't be here anyway, because we can't go to a vulnerable home, right? So they'll mark on your record when they get back to the office, and they fill out their paperwork, they'll say, vulnerable. Which means they won't come back again, they'll pass it back to the council, right? Or, the other thing they're going to do is write on your file, non-cooperative, yeah, or no tangible assets, that's another one, right? No tangible assets or non-cooperative. That tells them, if we're next in the area, don't bother with that one, yeah, because they're after low-hanging fruit. Don't be the low-hanging fruit, okay? Make it difficult for them. Confuse them somehow. Speak a different language, if you can. Make up a language, you know, and just sort of babble it at them, and then shut the door. So, there's no one way to deal with these people. Like I said, there's many different ways, and every single time, I mean, I've dealt with them dozens of times, not just at my home, but obviously at my families and friends, etc., and other people that I've helped. And I deal with them differently, like I say, each time, depending on how I feel and what kind of mood I'm in and whether I can be bothered or not. Yeah. So ultimately, they get nothing from me, and because they get nothing from me, they end up leaving. But the problem is, some people have got a vehicle on their driveway worth over £1,350, which means they believe they can clamp it, right? There's an easy way to deal with a clamp. First of all, they've agreed that you can cut it off. So invest in about 20, 30 quid on a cheap angle grinder on eBay or Tesco or something like that, right? Cheap angle grinder to cut off the clamp. Or the other way to deal with it is to wait until they turn up with a pickup truck to take the car, right? Then what you do is you grab your sunglasses and some headphones and you sit in your car and you lock the door. Put the sunglasses on and the headphones. Why do you do that? Well, you cut off all lines of communication by doing so, right? If they can't make eye contact with you and get your attention, they know you can't hear them, or they believe you can't hear them. You might have them switched on, but it's given the visual effect that they need, which is there's no point in us shouting all this silly stuff at them and making all these threats to them because they can't hear us, can't see us, can't hear us, right? You have a right to sit in that car, okay? They haven't taken anything from you. Anybody who has the car taken, ultimately, it means you gave your consent one way or another. You may have been standing there saying, no, 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 but that doesn't matter. Eventually, you let them take the vehicle. You didn't physically stop them any way whatsoever, right? Simply by sitting in your car. That's all you have to do. So a car cannot be moved, right, if somebody's sitting in it. No vehicle can be, if somebody is sitting in it. And I know I keep saying vehicle rather than private conveyance, but that's intentional because I'm talking about the system we currently exist in. Like I say, not the one I would like to be living in, but the one we're living in, okay? And when you've learnt it all your life, it's tricky to get those words out of your head. They did that on purpose, right? So, deal with them the easiest way possible, and only deal with them when they're knocking on your door, right? Because you're going to spend 15 seconds of energy. How much energy does it take to type up a letter? To think about what the content, to type it up, to proofread it, to get an envelope, to get a stamp, to post it, to wait for it to come back, to respond to it. 15 seconds all it takes, mate. 15 seconds, that's it. It's dealt with, it's done. They go away. Because they realise they're getting nothing here. So why stand here for another hour? There's no point. Now my car is an old 2004 Vauxhall Zafira. So it's a piece of shit anyway. You know, nobody wants it. Yeah? The insurance company reckons it's worth 300 quid. Brilliant for me. Because that means nobody can take it, nobody wants to take it. Brilliant. That means I've always got a car. Got me here, you know? It'll get me home again. So, I don't need some flash car. But if I did have, like I say, all I need to protect it is sunglasses and headphones. That's it. And you've protected it, because they can't move it. They can't physically put their hands on you. They don't have a warrant for that. The police can't get involved, because they commit an offence if they do. Section 26 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, of which you have a laminated sheet of in your pack. Now this is to keep, say, on the inside of your door or somewhere handy, okay? In case the police are ever called, you can either quote this to them or you can hand it to them. There. Now what this says, basically, to sum up, is that a police constable cannot create a benefit or detriment to another person, right? So they can't create a detriment to you and a benefit to the so-called bailiff. And I say so-called bailiff because although they are bailiffs as well, quite often, they come to you as an enforcement agent of the council. They're not there as a bailiff. We just refer to them as bailiffs. Okay? Only bailiffs are appointed by courts. If they're not appointed by the court, they're not a bailiff. Like I say, there might be a licensed bailiff as well, but they're not there in the capacity of a bailiff. Now let me talk about that actually with a bailiff, right? Because I've seen obviously lots and lots of videos. I'll come back to this section 26 in a minute. I've seen lots of videos. I was watching one recently, somebody I met recently, where she was evicted from her home a couple of days ago. But I saw this other one as well, where it's all about barking about, you know, what's legal, what's not legal, blah, blah, blah. Common law this, wetting contract that, right? There's a simpler way of dealing with these people. Much simpler way that nobody seems to, and I find it frustrating when I watch them, because I think, why haven't you said this? Okay, when the police turn up, when they call the police because you've refused them access, right, they call the police. Police turn up. First thing you do is do not get them to identify their collar number. Worst thing you can do. Okay, their collar number is a serial number for a robot. Okay, it's not the name of a human. You need the human name, not the surname. And you'll notice if you ask a police officer for their name, some will give their name, some won't, but they'll never give you their first name, they'll give you their surname and then their collar number, right? They're identified to you as a robot, and you don't want to speak to a robot. So don't ask for their collar number. If you want to take note of it, to take action, you can clearly see it. You can catch it on your camera or whatever. You don't need to ask them for it, okay? You're not actually gaining authority over them. What you're doing is you're saying to them, may I remind you that you are a police officer with authority over me, right? and I am a subject of the Crown. That's what you're saying, right? Because I'm communicating with you, I'm a dead entity, so therefore I'm a subject of the Crown. I don't exist as a living being. What you want is their first name. So how do you get their first name if they won't give it to you? Well, it's simple. You ask to see their warrant card, right? So as soon as they turn up, you say, right, sorry, just before I speak with the officer, are you a warranted police officer, a warranted police constable, or a PCSO? And they'll say, oh, I'm a warranted officer. Okay, could you just prove that to me? I just want to make sure you are who you say you are. Right? Yeah, okay, there's the warrant card. You look for their first name, that's all you're interested in. Don't worry about what the photo looks like or what station they're from, what the surname is. You just want that first name, okay? Because when you use that first name, you're going to use, hopefully it's going to be something like Chris, Christopher even, right? But you're going to use Chris. You're going to say, okay, thank you, Chris, right? Because now you're talking to the human being. Chris is the human being that's operating the robot, right? You're talking to using the name his peers use in his social circles, okay? So you're referring to him as Chris. Now when you want to assert something upon them, you use the extended version of their name. So Christopher. Here's the thing, Christopher. Here's how it is, Christopher. Here's the situation, Christopher. Right? If you want to go back to being friendly again with him, because you keep it like a roller coaster, because that's what confuses the human brain. That's why life is a roller coaster. So also think in terms of that extended name is how they were indoctrinated at school. Up to that point, they've only really been known by their first name, by their, referred to by their family and their friends. But when they get to school, they start to really learn this is your name and your surname, and you must identify, and you must write it at the top of the page every time, and you must do this, you must do that, right? You must keep identifying as that, right? But they will always use, in schools and places of authority, they will always use the extended version of the name, just like your parents would. So it would be like, whereas I'm known as Davey, it would be like my mum going, David Paul Stewart, because I've been naughty. You see, they're using my official name, right? And that's the same as when you're at school. They use your official full-length name, not shortened, when they're telling you off or when they're asserting something to you, right? So that's the emotional state you want to get into this police officer's head, right? Because it's all about psychology, all of it. How you deal with it and the results that you get from it is all about applying simple psychological tricks, okay? So, like I say, use the first name, the shortened version if you can, right? But also, when you're asserting something, change your tone to an assertive tone, but friendly, yeah? And use the lengthened version of their name, yeah? And that way, they'll absorb that information or that request or command easier than they would if you shouted at or barked it at them. Also, never ask them who you work for. They don't work for you, they work for the Crown. They took their oath to the Crown, not to you. Now, they did take an oath to protect you as subjects of the Crown, right? And I guarantee you not a single police officer committed it to memory. I did. It took me about an hour. It's written on the bottom of your sheets here, the police attestation. And I can quote it to you, and I would advise you all to learn it off by heart if you can, right? Because there's some really important stuff in there that they tend to forget on a day-to-day basis. See, personally, I think they should be made to say this on every shift. They should be made to declare this every single time before they begin their shift, right? So I'll quote it to you. I do solemnly and sincerely declare and affirm that I will well and truly serve the King in the office of Constable with fairness, integrity, diligence and impartiality, upholding fundamental human rights and according equal respect to all people, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause the peace to be kept and preserved, and prevent all offences against people and property, and that while I continue to hold the said office, I will, to the best of my skill and knowledge, discharge all the duties thereof faithfully and according to law. Right? It took me an hour to learn it. I would recommend learning it, right? Because it says in there, integrity, diligence and fairness. Well, first of all, if they've turned up and said, yeah, we've seen his warrant and yeah, we agree that's a warrant. How do you know? You're a police officer. You're not a barrister or a solicitor. If you knew really what a warrant, if you served a warrant, you know it looks nothing like that. It's not on an iPad. An actual warrant is a signed warrant, right? So you don't know anything. So you haven't applied due diligence. You should have ascertained the details of the court and then contacted the court and then said, I'm a police officer, I need to ascertain these details to make sure this warrant is legal so it can be enforced. Right? That's what they should do if they're going to apply diligence. Impartiality, they're never impartial. Never impartial. Even if you call them, first thing they'll do is go over to the enforcement agents. First thing they'll do, they'll talk to them first. Because they want to get their story, right? And of course, the first story always sets the benchmark for what they're going to believe, right? So, they don't use impartiality. They always take the side of the corporation. Upholding fundamental human rights. Okay? Now, human rights, we think, mean our living rights. They're very different. Okay? Human rights are afforded to you because you're dead entities. Right? So they give you the rights of a human. Okay? So they're a dead legal declaration. Okay? But you can use that to your benefit. Okay? Because like I say, we live in this corrupt, fraudulent system. We may as well use it to our benefit. Okay? If you're a living being, you don't stand under common law or admiralty law, you stand under natural law. Okay? Natural law is the only law. Now the trouble with natural law is that there's no real laws. Anything you can do. Right? But, as Homo sapiens, we're not all raging lunatics who will go around slaughtering each other. There was Homo erectus used to hunt Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens, as what we are, used to commune. They were communal creatures, which is why we find we commune, we join groups, we bond, we have a family. We don't go off individually and start slaughtering villages, etc. Okay? So the dominant species was the peaceful communal one, right? That had the capacity to love and share positive energy with each other. Homo erectus obviously died out because they were just an angry mob. So, if you can quote that police oath to them, right? First of all, you're showing them that you know what you're talking about. You've taken the time and effort to do some research. And you've committed it to memory, which is more than what they've done. So they're going to feel quite inferior to you now. Okay? You've used their first name, which they didn't really want you to have. You've used their first name. You haven't got them to identify as a robot. Instead, you've spoken to a human being. When you're explaining to them the situation, if you want to explain the situation to them about the bailiffs or the enforcement agents, what you do is you put them in the situation, in the scenario in their head. How would you feel if these came to your home and you claimed you didn't owe them money and they're saying they're going to come and do this and do that? How would you feel? Would your family be scared? Would your children be okay with that? The way they bang on the door, the way they make threats to come in and take their kids' PlayStation, you know? How would you feel? Put it in their head. Give them that image in their head. Because now you've tapped through to the human, you may as well use it. Yeah? And get them to feel a bit more sympathetic towards your situation. But then, like I say, they will say, no, we believe that they're okay, so they're going to enforce that. Right? No. That's not what's going to happen. Because that's not what happens legally with a warrant. Okay, with a warrant of entry. Now, there'll only be a warrant of entry on safety grounds. Okay, if you change your meters, I don't know if anybody's changed their meters here. Many people have. I deal with it quite a lot. I get a lot of phone calls with Octopus Energy or whatever at their door, needing to know what to do now. The thing is, right, with these warrants of entry, if you refuse it, what do? They say they're going to stronghold their way in. No, that's not the legal process. The legal process is to take that now back to the issuing court and say, excuse me, judge or magistrate, they refused your authority. You might want to issue an arrest warrant to bring them before you for contempt of court. Because ignoring a genuine warrant is a contempt of court. But of course they're not going to do that because these warrants don't come from a judge or a magistrate. Right? They come from a bulk processing centre. Okay? And you get it just by applying. Simple as that. You get it just by applying. You don't have to prove anything, you just have to tick the box that declares that the information I have given is truthful to the best of my knowledge. That's all they have to do. Right? And then it's automatically issued by a computer. So you've committed no contempt of court. In fact, in these bulk centres, these business centres, there are no legally trained staff at all. I know this because I've spoken to them before. There's no legally trained staff. They have no judges, they have no magistrates, they have no solicitors, no barristers, no justices of the peace. It's just a data processing centre, which people on minimum wage turn up and input applications, that's it. Most applications are obviously done online, right? And so as soon as they find out, oh, you've changed your meters up, yeah, brilliant, right. Now we can get a warrant of entry, right? But like I say, all you do is you say to the police officer, right, he's saying he's got a warrant of entry, I can test that, I don't believe it's a genuine warrant, but if it is, let's assume it is, officer, right? Christopher, right? Let's assume it is Christopher. He now needs to, I've refused him entry, he's not coming in here, simple as that, okay? And I will defend the property, right? So he's not coming in here. There's no way that's going to happen. And if he tries to, I'll expect you to arrest him for a breach of the peace, okay? If you're doing your duty, remember your oath. Upholding fundamental human rights, fairness, integrity, impartiality, all that, protecting against all offences against people and property. It says it in your oath. You took that oath, you are bound by that oath. Right? Now, if he doesn't like the fact that I'm not letting him in, right, he needs to now go back to the court and report it to the court. And they will issue an arrest warrant and probably send you out to come and arrest me. Right? We'll see. Or they'll send one of their court-appointed bailiffs with powers of arrest. But of course, like I say, that's not going to happen because it never went through. You're not contempting a judge or a magistrate. It's a data processing centre. County Court Business Centre, that's it. Okay? So it means nothing. It's not, it can't stand up in law. It's all purely by your consent. Yeah? And you believe in that you have to comply with that. You don't have to comply with that at all. If you want to comply with a judge as trustee of your birth trust, because that's what you're doing, you're just being trustee of your birth trust. Right? I keep saying your birth trust, it's not your birth trust. It was set up by the Crown Corporation. They used your life, your existence, right? They used that to create that birth trust. Right? And then they didn't just name you as a beneficiary of that birth trust, they also named themselves as a beneficiary of that birth trust, and also trustees and grantors of that birth trust, right? Which means in the absence of you, right, in the absence of you, there is only one trustee, and that is the Crown Corporation, right? So they're liable to pay your debts. They're liable to pay all of those liabilities of that birth trust. You're only liable when you declare yourself as that trustee. Now, if you don't declare yourself as that trustee, the Crown cannot deny that it is a trustee, because if it does, it means there's no trustee. And if there's no trustee, there could be no trust. Okay, so the trust would have to be dissolved. So why do they create this trust, this birth trust? Simple. You have an entitlement, right? 170 millionth is the population currently, 70 million in the UK. Right, 170 millionth of the global domestic product of United Kingdom PLC, right, you have a share of. 170 millionth of that. Okay? That equates currently to around about, I calculated it, just under £40,000 a year. Right? Obviously, as the global domestic product rises, so does the population. So it generally works out the same sort of year in, year out. So you're entitled to that money. That money is actually the money that was supposed to go to the living being who was lost at sea, beyond the seas, according to the Settegay Act. Right? But of course, it doesn't. It doesn't. The Crown are the managers of that birth trust. They are the managers. And your parents gave them the authority to be the managers of that birth trust. They didn't tell them they were putting themselves down as a beneficiary, but of course they can only do that so they can take taxes and stuff from you, right? And benefit themselves. They are a trustee. They take your taxes, right? They pay it to themselves as beneficiary. So they are named as the grantor, the person who puts assets into the trust, the trustee, the person who's liable to pay all liabilities of the trust, right? All liabilities, and of course the beneficiary, who has no liability whatsoever. Okay? The beneficiary just benefits. A trust is set up purely for the beneficiary's purpose. So if they name themselves as a beneficiary, what they do is they continue to treat you as dead, missing, lost at sea, beyond the seas, it says. When you finally die or become deceased, now think of that word, deceased, right? D, as in D-E, is an Old English prefix meaning from, okay? So you're dead from ceased. So you must have ceased at some point, mustn't you? I.e. shortly after birth, you ceased. Or after the 7 years that they give you to come and claim back your living status, you became ceased. So when they finally find your body washed up ashore, having shot itself in the back of the head 3 times, right? I have to look at it these days. They then make a claim. Suddenly they see you. They see this formerly living being, but in their actual form, their dead form. Because now they are the only beneficiary, right? Which means that they can claim all of your estate that you didn't even know you had. Now, of course, you know, many of you know that this money accumulates, right? And if you look in at certain numbered accounts, there were some that were hacked actually a few years ago. Swiss accounts, and it had all of the countries of the world and their wealth. Right? I think the UK was something like 22.5 trillion or something in these accounts. They've got trillions in these accounts, and it's because they claim it as the sole beneficiary upon your death. Right? So it's worthwhile them doing it because they can get you to earn the money, right? As the and put that money into the trust as a grantor of the trust, or a set law of the trust, as it's also known. They get you to pay all liabilities of the trust by declaring yourself as the trust itself. You're saying, I am the trust. Yeah, not a person acting on behalf of the trust, I am the trust. That's what you're saying. When I say I am David Stewart, I'm saying I am that trust. That's what I'm saying, right? And if I'm the trust, that means I'm all three elements of that trust. I am the trustee, I am the beneficiary, and I am the settlor of the trust, right? So I put assets in the trust, I also withdraw that and go and get my shopping. When I pay for my shopping, I'm paying for it with this birth trust's money, not my money. As a living being, it's not mine. Because that birth trust is not mine. It was created fraudulently. And they pretended I was dead, and they continue to do so. So it's nothing to do with me, right? But I will use it, I will exploit it, if I want a Netflix subscription or a bank account, or, you know, I want a debit card, and I want to do online shopping, I want Amazon next day delivery, right? Then of course I'm going to exploit it. That's what it's all about. It benefits me to do so. But if somebody's laying a claim upon me, and I'm not going to benefit from it, so if I've maxed out my credit card, for example, right, and they're saying, oh, we want, you know, a couple of £100 off you each month. So, well, can I still use my credit card there? And they say, well, no, you've reached your limit. Oh, it doesn't benefit me, does it? No longer benefits me. So if you want that money, you're going to have to go to the trustee, because I'm now not the trustee. Right? Because you can give yourself life or death any time you want. You can declare yourself as a dead entity to participate in their fraud, in their playground, in their illusion. Right? And you do that to benefit yourself. But also, you're a living being. You have sovereign rights, which means until you contract, right, you're not a dead entity unless you speak to a dead entity. Right? While you're in your home, yeah, in my home, I'm known by my kids as Dad. My friends and family who come round as Davey. My missus is a number of four-letter words. So I'm known by different things, but I'm not known as David Paul Stewart. Right? Letters turn up, but no commerce takes place in my house. No commerce at all. Now, I do online shopping, so you could say, well, that's in your house, isn't it? No, it's not. The computer's in my house, right? But the internet is, 6,000 miles away, maybe? Yeah, that's not in my house. I'm entering into a different world. I'm talking about in my house, right? In this house that I'm in, yeah, I'm not handing over cash to anybody, right? So I'm a sovereign being, I'm a living being. Now, you can remain a sovereign being and speak to these dead entities simply just by asking questions, right? And you treat it in the same way you would as if you were in what you believe to be a haunted house, right? If you're in a haunted house, you feel there's a spirit there, you're going to ask it questions. Who's there? What do you want? Why are you here? Why did you choose me? Where did you hide the money? You know? Right? So you can ask it questions, but you won't get an answer back. So you treat it like that. You ask questions, you don't care about what they say. Right? So they say to you, knock, Mr. Stewart, you say, who are you? Say, oh, I'm Mr. Blah Blah from Marston's. What are you doing here? Well, I need to discuss with you about your council tax. Who sent you? Well, I'm here on behalf of the council. Why haven't the council come here themselves? Just keep asking questions, right? But don't make a statement. The reason you're asking questions is because of that word, as king, as sovereign. You're demanding answers as a sovereign, as king. Yeah? And if they fall under your authority and answer your questions, then they are doing just that, falling under your authority, because you are as king. Right? So, if you only ask questions and don't make statements, if you want to make a statement, put it in the form of a question. You know, instead of saying you're a dickhead, say, are you a dickhead? You know, there's always a way to get your point over. Okay, so always put it in the form of questions. Now that's if you're feeling a bit mischievous and you want to have a bit of fun with them. And I've done this before with them, right? So you just ask the questions until they get bored and they say, oh, do you know what, I've had enough. Or you say, do you know what, I've had enough now. See you later. Shut the door. That door, they can't bust that open. They can't force their way past you. They can't physically touch you at all. Okay? They can't physically touch you at all. I watched a video from a couple of days ago of energy company. Somebody changed their meter, their electric meter. It was outside their property, but within the boundaries of the property. And the police turned up and they said to them, well, we believe that's, yeah, they showed us the warrant, we're happy with it, that's that, right? And in the end, the guy said, right, so I'm instructed by the office to come and I've got to remove that and take the meter. And they're saying, but it's not your meter. No, we need to take it as evidence. And I'm there thinking, it doesn't say anywhere on any paperwork, right, issued by a court, allegedly, right, it doesn't say anywhere that you have the right to see. You're not the police. You don't have the right to seize evidence. Only the police do, right? You have to be a warranted officer to be able to seize evidence, else it's theft. But nobody seemed to put that point to them. And they ended up taking that property, right? Which then, obviously, they say that, well, I'm going to put in this complaint and write that letter, write this. Could have easily been dealt with. Just, right, okay, you're not coming in. Go back to the court and tell your judge or your magistrate that. Yeah? And if they're really pissed off with me, they'll issue an arrest warrant. And I'll be brought before them and made to obey if it's real. But it's not real. As I say, it's a bulk processing centre. So there can be no contempt of court. So if you do manage to get them to go away on that basis, they won't be back again with an arrest warrant. Simple fact. But most of these warrants of entry are for the occupier. Who the hell is the occupier? That's not my name. It's capitalised. Capital first letters of each. Capital T, capital O. And if it's capitalised, it doesn't all have to be capitalised. Capital is a financial term, it's a legal term. So anything that's capitalised, any pronouns or anything that's capitalised, they're legal terms. Right? They're being capitalised upon. So, what time are we on? Oh, we've got lots of time. Right, so, let's go back to this. Criminal Justice Quarter. Yeah?
Start, mate, just wanted to ask you...
Good, thanks.
You sure, yeah?
Yeah.
We want to take a break, because other people have ordered food.
Yeah.
Just before 2,
Yeah, we could.
maybe about 1:45.
Yeah, okay.
And then
Yeah,
maybe
give them about 25 minutes.
45 minutes to an hour from that time.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cheers, mate.
Cool. Right, so, Criminal Justice and Court Act. Where are we? Section 26 makes it an offence for a police officer and certain other persons to exercise improperly the powers and privileges of a constable. It supplements the existing common law offence of misconduct in public office. If we go to subsection 2, provides that a person guilty of the offence is liable on conviction on indictment to a sentence, imprisonment of 14 years or a fine or both. Subsection 3, actually no, I'm going to go to subsection 4, provides that a police constable exercises the powers and privileges of a constable improperly if the exercise of a power or privilege is for the purpose of achieving a benefit to the officer or a benefit or detriment for another person, and that a reasonable person would not expect the power or privilege to be exercised for the purpose of achieving that benefit or detriment. So, this you can quote to the police, or you can let them read it. Okay, so keep this handy somewhere, as well as the police oath at the bottom of it. Because like I say, you have to remind them, okay, not of the laws they stand under, but the oath they took, fundamentally, right? Because that's the most important thing to them, is they took the oath to the crown, right? but also the fact that the Crown will ditch them in a heartbeat, yeah, rather than be held liable itself. Right? So any of its employees that misbehave and abuse their powers, it's really the Crown that are misbehaving and abusing their powers. Okay? They have agents misbehaving on their behalf. But of course, in their code of conduct, the College of Policing Code of Conduct, it clearly states in there, and this is something you can say to them, excuse me, it clearly states in there that when they act unlawfully, right, they do so as a citizen and not as a police officer, right, for the amount of time that they are offending. So if they offend for 10 seconds, that means that the Crown Corporation completely disown them for that 10 seconds, right, but then re-own them after that 10 seconds, right, in order to negate any obligations on them and any liabilities for their thugs. Because that's all they are, they're just paid thugs, paid security thugs, revenue generators, okay? Never think that you're friends with one, because you're not, okay? They're not your friend, they're too heavily programmed, they're too heavily, you really have got to try to get through to that human being inside, okay? It doesn't come easy, unless you use the right little tricks, in which case you can trick them into providing their first name and standing under your authority. But just don't tell them they're standing under your authority. So this is a very serious offence, and at this point also you're basically telling the police you've done enough research, you know what you're talking about, you've memorised the oath, hopefully, right? You've memorised the oath, so therefore you've done probably a lot more research than that, and know an awful lot more than these police officers do. So they immediately lose the higher ground with you, okay? I was going to say higher moral ground, but there's no morals in dead entities. Morals are for the living, not the dead. That's how come they can inject a nation and kill them if they want to, because they're already dead. Yeah, it's not a morality issue to them. Although we know it is a morality issue, because deep down they know we're not dead until they kill us with their chemtrails, etc. Right? So it exonerates them from any kind of because the people who run the world are obviously sovereign. Yeah, they claim their sovereignty. They answer to nobody, right? Everybody else, as far as they're concerned, is a nothing to them. Is an absolute nothing. They don't care about you. Don't ever think that they do. Even if they're talking to you in a nice way, a police officer this is, they're talking to you in a nice way. It's part of their training. They were trained to deal with you in that way for this particular situation, for this particular type of person. Okay, so they run programs, because this up here is an organic computer, and it's the most powerful computer on the planet. Okay, the most powerful computer. No computer created by man has ever surpassed or equaled the human brain. It is capable of so much, and they only know a tiny percentage of the brain. Okay, as much as they've studied it for centuries, they only know a very tiny amount about the brain, simply because they can only scan it from the outside, right? Because as soon as you cut into it, it dies, right? So therefore they can't cut into it, which is why they want to create Neuralink and have probes going in there that will feed back information deeper down and give them a better understanding of how it works and how to manipulate it and how to potentially reproduce it, in an artificial form. So this is a powerful computer, okay? It powers, it supplies all the peripherals, the arms, the fingers, the legs, the toes, the lot, right? It's incredible how it interprets information. So, like the question, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Who here believes yes it does? You show of hands. Who here believes it doesn't? Who here doesn't give a shit? Yeah. Right, so obviously the answer to that is, of course it doesn't make a sound. What it does, it makes a frequency. You make the sounds in your head, okay? Sounds are made in your head. The ear canal picks up the frequency, it bangs a tiny little hammer against a tiny little drum, creates a digital code of ones and zeros, which your brain turns into a sound. So sound is only heard inside your head. Frequencies travel around, okay? And that's what your human brain is capable of naturally. Things like that. Seeing things up here, where you believe you're seeing them here. But you're not, you're seeing the images in there. And you can manipulate those images and you can change them, you can manipulate other people's images. We do it all the time, every day, with our interactions. We change people's lives completely, every single day, with every single thought we have, because every thought leads to the next thought. And the next thought, which eventually leads to an action, which leads to an interaction, which has ripple effects that goes on for infinity, way after we're dead. Okay? So, we're treated by the state as being none of that. We're treated as being dumb, stupid, illiterate. Okay? Which is why when you go to vote, if you vote, hopefully you don't, but if you did go to vote, right, you sign it in the form of an illiterate man with an X. Okay? That's your signature. Now some people say, oh, spoil your ballot paper, that's what you should do, protest vote. It still gets counted, of course it still gets counted. Doesn't matter what you write, it's your signature. It may as well be an X. They're not reading that going, oh, he's got a good point, you know. That Starmer is a bit boring, you know. Nobody cares, yeah. If you wrote, I hate Keir Starmer, that's your signature, as far as they're concerned. It's not a protest at all. Okay? So, it gives them consent to rule, the Crown Corporation, which is why it's His Majesty's government, not the people's government. It's His Majesty's official opposition, not the people's official opposition. Okay? When somebody gets voted in as an MP, they take their oath to the King and the Crown. They don't take the oath to the people who voted them in, they take it to the Crown. So they're all corrupt, all of them, right? All of them. They claim to represent you, they don't care about you, they care about them, themselves, that's all they care about. And the secret clubs they can become a part of. So they don't care about you, so they'll abuse your rights every which way but loose. So, it's important, as I say, you have this notice, because this is treated in law, right? Ultimately, in law, this is treated seriously. And the reason it's taken seriously is simply because all the rich knobs own property, lots of it. And they want no trespassing to protect their property, right? So this stands in law and is heavily protected in law and gives you certain rights on how to behave and what to do and how to react, right? This one is just to put in your car. It just says, by attaching any device or document to this vehicle, including but not limited to vehicle clamps, penalty charge notices, devices, etc., you agree to pay a fee of not less than £250 plus all charges, penalties and fees relating to the PCM clamp device attached to this vehicle. The amount due shall be payable on demand to the registered keeper of this vehicle. Failure to pay may result in enforcement action being taken against you. Imagine that, sending bailiffs right to bailiffs. Be awesome. Whereby you agree to pay all legal costs / fees. The vehicle owner assumes no liability for damage during removal of clamps. Again, a tacit consent contract. Now, I've got one of these in my window, right? And I popped into, on the way back from dropping my missus at work, I stopped in the town and popped into Greg's, right? And I was parked on double yellows. I do it quite often, so. I was parked on double yellows, right? And I could see the guy, the collector, yeah, coming down the road, but I just thought, that's fine, I'm not going to play it anyway, so, and I'm certainly not going to stand there and argue with him. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get the donuts that I wanted, and then I'm going to go back in my car, and regardless of what he's doing, and drive off. Simple as that. Ignore all notices in future. However, interestingly, he saw it, he stood there, he read it, and then just walked off. And I'm standing in the queue opposite where it's parked. I'm standing in the queue in Greg's opposite where it's parked, and I was gobsmacked, to be honest, because I expected him to be like, oh yeah, we'll get on the radio and, you know, or write this down, I get my little keypad or whatever. No, he just walked off. So it does work. I'm not saying it's always going to work. I'm not saying they're all going to go, oh, but he just didn't want anything to do with it. He obviously thought, you know what, plenty of other cars I can get today, which doesn't make me liable for anything, right? Right, so, what are we on now? Right, so we've got about 10 minutes. Right, so we've got 2 of those. You've also got, I'll talk more in depth about these after we have a break. We've also got a promissory note. Now, a promissory note is issued by the trustee of your birth trust, right? So you don't issue a promissory note as a living being, because living beings, as I said, don't act in commerce. There's no commerce with living beings. That's how they trick you when they say you're driving, right? Because you need to buy petrol. And to buy petrol, you need to create a transaction. If there's proof there that you transacted by putting fuel in that vehicle, you're a dead entity. Yeah, they've got plenty of proof. As I say, all they have to do is get you to speak to them somehow, respond to them when they pull you over, and you're a dead entity. They just then have to do their detective work and figure out which dead entity you are, so they can put a liability claim against you. So you can issue a promissory note to settle any debt whatsoever, right? It can settle any debt at all. The thing is, if you're going to use it to settle unsecured debt, you're wasting a lot of time and energy, because this is going to come with somewhat of a fight, okay? Not a huge fight, not a fisticuffs or anybody at your door kind of situation, but it's going to be some kind of energy involved in the process, right? You're not just going to issue it and they go, all right, thanks very much, cheers for that, yeah, all settled, crossed it off. Never going to happen, okay? But it doesn't matter, okay? Because all that matters is that you've issued it and it's a legal document, right? It's legal under the Bills of Exchange Act 1884. It's the 1882, sorry. Part 4, right? It's defined as being a negotiable financial instrument upon creation, signature, and delivery. There's no mention of acceptance. Acceptance is not a requirement for a promissory note to then become, for want of a better word, live and have value, right? You're issuing it as the trustee of your birth trust to settle a liability. It instantly settles that liability once you can prove it's been delivered. Now, when they contact you and say, we don't accept promissory notes, well, they've got no choice. Is the honest answer to that. They've got no choice. They don't accept it on the grounds of payment preference, right? That's not a legitimate reason to reject a liability, a payment for a liability that is certain in cash, which is how it's defined in Part 4 of the Bills of Exchange Act, right? It's a promise to pay certain in cash, right? Now, all the other accepted methods that they say they take, you know, debit card, cheque, postal order, they're not actually demands in cash. Yeah? No cash changes hands at all. Digits on a screen. They're instructions. A cheque is a promissory note. And you get people who have said to me before, but hang on, Davey, I've seen this video and this guy's saying you can't legitimately, it's fraud to issue it. Well, of course it's fraud. It's all fraud. I told you that right at the start. The whole system's fraud. To them, it's not fraud, right? The Bills of Exchange Act, it's not fraud. But of course, it's all built upon fraud. So yes, it is fraudulent, but in Fielding and Platt Limited versus Salim Najjar 1969, the case law that is written upon the promissory note, the case itself has nothing to do with you issuing the promissory note. That's not the apparent bit. And this is what you'll get sometimes. You'll get a response saying, oh, it turns out, that this was to do with two businesses, or a private contractor and a business and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but first of all, he wasn't a bank, was he? So it's not just banks that can issue promissory notes, right? A cheque is a promissory note and you can issue a cheque, right? So, all a promissory note is an IOU. It says, I owe you this money, I'm telling you I owe you this money, I promise you I'll honour this money. Right? You don't need it all now. You could do it as an on-demand note, so you could send it to them and say, bring me that note and I'll pay you in full. Yeah? On condition you bring me that original note. And that's the thing. This has got a payment schedule within it, right, that you set the payment amount. Right? So that payment schedule is what they can collect on a particular date of the month. Now, you'll give them reasonable time, i.e. before the next one is due, because it doesn't carry over. Yeah? So you'll give them up to a month to collect on that one before they lose the ability to collect on that. They can only collect on the next one. Right? However, they must produce the original signed note, not a photocopy, not a screenshot, not a scan or anything like that, because it has value. Just like a £20 note, you can't go into Sainsbury's with a photocopy of a £20 note and buy your shopping. It has to be the original, has to be produced, right? That's how bond certificates work, right? Has to be the original to have the value. So, they're not going to come and collect on this note, and that's why you're doing it. You're forcing their hand. Okay? You're forcing their hand to sell it on the international markets. Because they're very valuable, they're used for their face value as security certificates for fractional reserve banking. Right? So with fractional reserve banking, whatever you've got in your coffers, you can lend up to 9 times that amount, as long as it's securitized by what you've got, right? Which only has to be essentially a tenth. Yeah. So if they buy a £10,000 promissory note for, let's say, 500 quid or £1,000, right? They paid £1,000, but they can now earn 90 grand on that. That's how fractional reserve banking works. It's all fraudulent. It's all to do with trickery and fraud. But they can do it and they get away with it. So these things are valuable to them. Okay? That's why they're accepted in law. That's why they're listed in the Bills of Exchange Act. Because they have value as soon as you have created it, signed it, and delivered it. So when you create it, you photocopy it. Yeah? Once you've signed it, you photocopy it. And then when you deliver it, or get it delivered, you do it with a track service. And you retain the information of that track service. Okay? Right, so we'll take a break there for a little while, 45 minutes, so? Yeah?
Easy money. I've got a couple of bailiffs around my address. One for me, probably for gas, I don't know. But I did buy. Women in black. Because our gate's not on, we don't put our gate on, we can't leave them out. We have got notices. So they've ignored them notices. I remember you got the gate up.
They always will ignore them. That's
They'll
a fact.
ignore them, but can I, because that notice, said that notice is valid, can I go, well, you came on to this property, could I charge you?
You could do. The way I see it is the ultimate aim is to get rid of them. That's the ultimate aim. Go away. Go away from my property.
The bailiff that came round left his name on the electric.
Yeah, to do that. But it's like I say, it depends how much energy you want to apply to the situation. Yeah? Because that's going to take a lot of energy. Right? Court battles, preparing statements, filing court documents, etc., etc. Do you want to go through that, or do you want to just get rid of them? Ultimately, you want to get rid of them and then have nothing more to do with them.
So if because I've communicated with other council, I can't afford to pay the bill and all that, and they've issued me with all this stuff. Because I've spoken to them before, I've contracted them. Because I've actually spoken to them.
Right at this moment, I'm a unicorn. Now, I'm not a unicorn. See what I did there? I decided when I was going to be a unicorn. You can decide when you're going to be a trustee and when you're not going to be a trustee. And if you don't communicate with them, it's not you they're after, it's the trustee. Right? So it's how you declare yourself. If they come out and say, are you a unicorn? And you go, yeah, that's me, yeah, then you're a unicorn. Yeah? Otherwise, you've nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with them. They can't communicate with you if you shut the door on them. Right? But you've answered the door to let them know you're going to shut the door on them. And if they come out again, they're just wasting up, using up their petrol reserves. That's it. Yeah, it's going to cost them money, not me. Right? Come out as many times as you want. I might be bored. I might need something to do. Come out, entertain me. That's the way you've got to treat it. And when you do, you ditch that fear. That fear just goes, and it does. You know, it eventually the pumping is not so intense, but also it's very different. Yeah? And I always say as well, when you do get rid of them, pat yourself on the back, really big yourself up. Yeah, as to how powerful you've just been. You just had bullies turn up, demanding money or goods from you, and you said no, and they didn't end up with anything. They walked away. Yeah, tail between the legs. They lost their energy and you gained yours. Right? You gained your power, so absorb that power and that energy. Yes, sir.
That was a deal with the council tax. What about electricity? Who covers a living man the right to have free electricity or water?
Right, so as a living being, you have a right to everything free. Right, as a living being. However, as a dead entity, yeah, you can still have rights like that. I haven't paid for energy in over 2 years.
Do they have the right to switch off electricity supply?
No, only if there's a safety issue. So if you change your meters, they lie to the court and say, oh, they tampered with the meters. That's how they report it, meter tampering, which creates potential safety issue. Oh, let's stamp that then. Yeah, there you go. You can have that warrant of entry. Go and check that out and make sure it's safe. What they don't do is say, oh, they have actually reported to us that they've got, you know, safety certificates. It has been checked. It has been deemed to be safe by a qualified engineer. They don't tell them all that, right? So when they come out to you, you basically say to them, go away. They go, well, we've got a warrant of entry. I don't care what you've got, pal. Yeah? If you don't like it, go back to your judge or your magistrate and tell him. Don't tell on me. Go on, see what he does. Yeah? I guarantee not a real live one actually stamped it or issued it. So you committed no contempt of court, right? And that's where they'll have to just swallow that fact.
They have the right. They don't have the right to cut electricity.
No. Only on safety issues. Only for safety issues. Right? Only safety issues. Because they don't own the electric. They don't own it. National Grid that owns it. And National Grid have got no means of a payment method. Right? So they have got no department to send you a bill direct. Right? They're your actual supplier. In the absence of them, gas and electric doesn't come into your home. In the absence of Octopus Energy or EDF or whatever, gas and electric still comes in my home. So they're not my supplier, are they? Therefore, they don't benefit me, do they? Yeah? All they do is take my money, take their cut and give that to them. Well, I'll tell you what, you go away, yeah? And if they want money from me because they supply me with something, I get a benefit from them, then they can bill me and I'll sort it out with a promissory note. So they can bill me and I'll deal with it. But I'm only dealing with them, not you lot. Not you lot who want to rob me. I've got no interest in. So when my energy company, Green Energy, went down the pan, a couple of years or so ago, I got an email a few weeks later from Shell Energy saying, oh, Mr. Stewart, welcome to Shell Energy. We're great. Yeah, how excited we are to have you as a customer. Right? And I thought, well, your excitement's about to die very quickly. So within 2 minutes, I responded to that email by saying, no thank you, I do not wish to contract with Shell Energy, not now, not ever. I got a response back in about 20 minutes. I was quite surprised it was that quick. Right? So, oh, we're very sorry, you do not wish to remain with Shell Energy. However, we have set up your account, we do hope you'll change your mind. Right? So I responded again, said exactly the same words, sent it back to them. I got another response, this time the following day, saying, oh, we're very sorry to hear that you definitely do not wish it. So once we set up your account, you can log into your account, or you can go to a switching service and switch to a new supplier, although we do hope you'll reconsider and stay with us. So I sent another email back to them and said, look, here's the thing. I do not now wish to contract with you, nor will I ever wish to contract with Shell Energy. Not now, not ever, no thank you. Any attempt to set up an account in my name will be an act of fraud. You do not have my permission to do so. Right? A few weeks later, welcome to your new account, Mr. Stewart. I thought, that's not my account. It's not my account. I don't know whose account that is. Similar name to the trustee name, yeah, but it's not my account, is it? So every so often, they ring me up, MIL, they're called collections, MIL collections, comes up on my phone, Truro, right? So I get a phone call, oh, hello, Mr. Stewart, who's that? It's Bob from MIL Collections, phoning on behalf of, we're acting on behalf of Shell Energy. Can you just confirm for me your full name and the first line of your address? No. Oh, well, if you don't, we can't talk to you. Well, stop bloody ringing me then. What are you ringing me for if you can't talk to me? This is the phone, you know how it works, right? It's a two-way conversation, yeah? So you're not prepared to... No. Okay, then I'm ending the call. Have a lovely day. Simple as that. No. I don't promote changing your meters. I promote changing your contract status, not your meters. Doesn't matter what meters you have. You have to have meters for it to be legal, right? You can legitimately have your own meters. That's perfectly legal. But as soon as you change them, as soon as they find out, and a lot of people made the big mistake of contacting the energy company and saying, I've got your meters here, I'm going to charge you for storage. Well, that was a foolish mistake. Yeah? That was a very foolish mistake, because now they go, oh, really? So you've admitted to tampering with the meters. That's what we're going to tell the court when we apply for the warrant. Right? And that will stop, because then they can come and harass you and they'll get a result. If they can cut you off, only to reconnect you if you contract with them. Do you see what I mean? They've got you over a barrel. But we all know it's not for the purpose of safety, right? Because what they could do is turn up and say, you've got your own meters, right, we need to do an inspection to make sure they're safe. And inspect them and say, yeah, okay, they're safe. That's what they should do, but of course they won't. They won't do a safety inspection. Their instructions are to remove them or to cap it, and to take this is their office telling them to take the equipment, because they don't want you waiting until they go to get it reconnected again the same day, you see. So they try and make it awkward for you by saying, oh no, we're taking that equipment for evidence. Well, you're not the police. You don't have a warrant to seize goods. You have a warrant of entry on safety grounds to make sure that the supply is safe, and that's it. Yes, for long, sorry.
I set my meters up. I have no electrical system. That was voted for. One day they're planning to put in, I still got my meters in situ. My electric's there, the no connection to it. My gas I had like 4 services certificates that I take to check to see it's marked. So on Monday they're planning to come and reconnect me. But I wanted to register my meters because that's my plan. But they're already me, they're telling me they're coming out.
So they've disconnected you for 6 months. Gone back, isn't it?
They didn't have a warrant, nothing. I've just come home one day and I've just got 2 fuses, I've got 2 fuses, everyone. So they disconnected me from this old fuse outside that nobody can use there. And that's how they did it, otherwise they did not.
Yeah. Like I say, because they managed to categorise it as a safety issue because it was a changing of the meters.
But since I've been to court, I've proved I've had 2, since March, because I've seen the last thing, I've had 2 safety certificates for the electric, after one, the ECP text. I've got 2 safety certificates, one for last year, one for this year, for the gas unit. There's no safety issue.
Oh, I know that. They know that.
My council took me to court, they're saying I've breached my tenancy because I'm messing with the guys. I've refused them access to everything, and the safety issue, so they issued an injunction like 2 months ago, but I was on holiday on the day of the court case, like basically stood to stand for me. So I went to court on Thursday, and stood there for myself, and I had this conversation with the judge, and he said I've had to pay because they refused to adjourn it, so it's been adjourned again, to see what happens after the adjournment.
Right, so
They've issued an injunction, and there's no need to.
I would say the simplest method available to you is to create a contract, right, but request that you don't have smart meters, okay, which is your, no, but that's your right, and you can negotiate that through Ofgem, okay, contact Ofgem, and because Ofgem will tell you straight, they can't force smart meters upon you, right, so you can, because also people have legitimate conditions, yeah, exactly, so yeah, create the contract, then wait till they've connected it with non-smart meters, then cancel the contract. Cancel the contract. They say, oh, we cancelled early, you owe us this much. Okay, there you go, promissory note for that much. There you go. I've now got a connection. They're your meters, they're not smart meters, and now, meaning their meters, and now you can't touch them, right? Because you can't get a warrant of entry for a debt. You can only get it for a safety issue. Right, I'm definitely going to take a break there, but we'll discuss it if you want ever after. Right, so any questions regarding the first part to do with, say, bailiffs, for example, enforcement, how to deal with them? Anything you're unsure of? Anyone? No. You have a chance to ask questions if you do think of anything at the end. So let's move on then to these promissory notes. Right, so they're protected in their fake legal system under the Bills of Exchange Act 1882, defined in Part 4 of that Act, as being a negotiable financial instrument upon creation, signature and delivery, as I said earlier. Right? That means acceptance is irrelevant. Okay? Your promise is a promise to pay certain in cash. That's how it defines it in the Bills of Exchange Act. Now, cash, obviously, is also a promissory note. Right? Banknotes are promissory notes. I promise to pay the bearer the sum of £10. Right? Although, who defines what the sum of actually is? Backed by nothing, it's fiat currency, which just means let it be. Let it be the case. Right, so Lord Denning ruled in Fielding and Platt Limited versus Salim Najjar 1969 in a case relating to promissory notes, but very different to what your situations would be. However, it's not the relevance of the case that matters, it's the relevance of the declaration made by Lord Denning in his ruling, which was, he said, "We have repeatedly said in this court that a bill of exchange or promissory note is to be treated as cash. It is to be honoured unless there is some good reason to the contrary. So what he said there is a promissory note is as good as, and therefore should be treated as, cash. So when you issue your promissory note as trustee of your birth trust, first of all you use your birth trust name. Don't need, Davey of the family Stewart, okay? Because what you're saying there, I'm from the family of surety names, right? You're not from a family of surety names. A long time ago, we didn't have surety names, okay? We were known as, John's son, which eventually became Johnson, or the baker, John the baker, who became John Baker, right? So we were known by descriptive terms, okay? But eventually that was all securitized and monetized and created a legal fiction. So you use that legal fiction. That's what you're issuing this promissory note as, because as I say, living beings don't issue promissory notes or cheques or cash or debit cards or credit cards or any of it. Okay, that's for dead entities, not living beings. And as I say, I operate as a dead entity when it suits me, when it benefits me to do so, right? So I don't reject it completely. Yeah, I know it's all fraud. But if that's the game they want to play, then I'll play their game of fraud. And I will equally commit that fraud, happily, yeah? And then claim no liability or responsibility for it. Yeah? But I need, obviously, certain things in life to make my life a bit more comfortable, I need to be able to make purchases online, for example, or bookings or whatever online, which requires a legal fiction, requires a birth trust, and a bank account, which is for a birth trust. But that's not my birth trust, as I stated earlier. And as such, when those details are shared amongst companies, it's very easy to say, you've shared my details. No, they didn't share your details. They shared the Crown Corporation's birth trust that they manage. They shared their details amongst their fraudulent friends. They're not your details. And you need to start detaching yourself from that birth trust, right, when it doesn't benefit you or suit you, okay? When it does, embrace it. Use it. If you want a Netflix account, you're only going to get that by using your birth trust, okay? And a debit card or a bank account, direct debit, whatever, to pay for it. All related to your birth trust. That property you own, you don't own it at all. Own a ship. Maritime. Yeah? It's a vessel. And it's owned by the birth trust. Everything I buy, when I buy equipment, the equipment I've got, camera equipment, sound equipment, all kinds of equipment I've got, I don't own it as a living man. Because I didn't create it, so I don't own it. I had to purchase it. And to purchase it, I had to use a legal fiction. I had to use a birth trust. So I used David Paul Stewart, that birth trust, okay, which they expect me to use. So I use that, and I purchase it. But I purchase it as an asset for the trust, not for me, okay? And that's how they get to come and take your property, right? They come to take your property and they're not classed as stealing. Because it's not yours. It's not your property, it's not your name, it's not your birth trust. It's all created out of fraud for the benefit of the Crown Corporation. They allow you to benefit from it in order to get you to participate in it. Because if you didn't benefit at all from it, you wouldn't use it. You'd have nothing at all to do with it, and therefore they couldn't perpetrate their crimes. Okay? So, stop claiming ownership of it. It's not yours. Not yours, never was, never will be. Yeah? If you want your own trust, you create your own private trust. Yeah? Whether you'll be able to get a bank account based on that trust is between you and the bank and at their discretion. Right? Ultimately, they're going to want that birth trust because that is worth an awful lot of money. You create a trust, you've got nothing in it. Yeah? You haven't automatically got a right to the 170 millionth of the GDP, right, which is legitimately yours and you have a right to claim. And this what gets me when people, I hear people maybe on the TV saying, oh, these scroungers on benefits. You're idiots. They're not benefits at all, right? They're actually what your dividends. That's what they are. They're your dividends. They're not a gift from the state. Okay, they're dividends for 170 millionth of the United Kingdom PLC, which you have a right to, because United Kingdom PLC is not a country, it's a company name. The country you live in is England, or Scotland, or Wales, or Northern Ireland, or the British Isles. United Kingdom is not a country, it's a company. And it's traded on the markets, on the international markets, and it's registered as a company and under the US Securities Commission, okay, as all of these countries are, right? So, because it's based on you, or those birth trusts, right, which are not actually you, because it's based on that, you're entitled to that dividend, or your birth trust is entitled to that dividend, and that's why they pay those dividends, right? And they call it benefits, yeah, because you're entitled to it. And they need you, maybe in the future, to pay tax or to buy or to consume, to purchase. So they get a benefit out of you for doing that, for allowing you to do that. But they'll only give you what you need. So they'll assess, you only need, the law says you need this much to live on, that's what we're going to give you to live on. Right? Because we're not in our benefit to release that money to you. But if you're earning your own money, then we'll retain that money. Yeah, we'll keep that, because we're also a beneficiary of that trust, being the Crown Corporation. Right, so, when you're issuing this note, you're issuing it as your birth trust name, written as you would generally do on any application or registration. Whether you do it in lowercase, block capitals, doesn't really matter, but it must relate back to the birth trust. Okay, because that's what you're acting as, the trustee of that trust. You're not acting outside of that, okay? And if you're not acting as the trustee, then you have no reason to be issuing a promissory note. I suggest issuing only promissory notes for secured debt, okay? Debts where there's a contract that exists that says, if I don't pay, I agree that you can take that car or this house. Okay, I agree that you can take that if I default, right? So you've already pre-agreed that, which means that property never actually becomes yours. With an unsecured debt, whether it be credit card, debit card, overdraft, whatever it may be, bank loan that wasn't secured on anything, then not paying it back, right? If you don't pay it, guess who pays it, or guess who's liable to pay? The Crown Corporation, because they are also the trustee. In the absence of you, they're the only trustee, right? When you're about claiming to be trustee, there's two trustees, so they sit back and they say, oh, we'll let that one deal with it, yeah? Let him pay all the liabilities, or her pay all the liabilities, right? So you get to choose when to be that trustee. And when you're issuing a promissory note, you're choosing to be that trustee. The house is owned by the trust, not by you. Right? You're living in it. But the advantage of where you can use this living being versus dead entity is when they come to your door, like I say, you don't have to answer anybody's questions. You don't have to contract with them. You don't have to communicate with them. You can remain a living being. Then they're completely stopped, because they've got nobody to claim the liability or place the liability on. Right? They have to have proof. They have to have that joinder in order to proceed against you. Right? So you issue this promissory note. You fill out the details. This promissory note was issued at, so that would be your address, for example, whether it's your business address or your home address, where it was issued. The date when you issued it, the amount in numbers and then in words, just like you would with a cheque. So you write a cheque, you know, £1,000 only, and then obviously in digits. That is so that nobody can add a 0 or a 1 or whatever at the beginning, right? This certifies that again, you put your full name there, or the name of the, sorry?
Capitals.
You do it in capitals if you want to, makes no difference, Ultimately, this is just to say, do you see that birth trust there? This relates to that, right? So do it as, whether it's on your birth certificate or on a letter that you would send, whether you capitalise the first letter and lowercase the rest, or whether you capitalise them all, makes no difference. It's just identifying factors that says this relates to the trustee of that particular trust, which is why you also put the date of birth, right? The date of birth of the trust. Birth, of course, comes from B-E-R-T-H, which of course is a maritime term. So your date of birth, so that name and date of birth relates it to that birth trust. It says that birth trust has issued a payment for a liability, right? Hereby promise to pay, and in brackets got holder. That's the name of the company or organisation that you're paying, whether it's Capital One Finance or Lloyds Bank PLC, you know, Jim's Greengrocers, whatever, right? They become the holder of the note. For value received, the payment will be made in monthly instalments. Now there's various types of promissory notes, okay? They're not all one uniform type. You've got on-demand promissory notes, like a bank note, right? You produce it, you get the goods in return immediately for the full value of the £20. If not, you get change as well to take it up to that value. This one, however, is a payment scheduled promissory note. So you set how much you're willing to pay. Now if you're paying, I don't know, say £300 a month on your mortgage, or £500 a month, let's say, on your mortgage, with most mortgages, they're interest only, right? So you're just paying the interest, you're never actually paying the mortgage. This pays the mortgage itself. This pays the full amount, right? And it settles it immediately by creating a separate unsecured debt. So you've paid and settled the secured debt by creating a brand new debt, which you have an obligation to repay. Right? You are legally obliged to honour that contract. However, you've set the terms of this contract in such a way that you've made it more difficult for them. They're not going to want to collect on it because, I'm going to come to your house. Why can't you send it to me? Can't you do a digital payment? No, I can't. No, I can't. And when the 1882 Bills of Exchange Act was created, nobody did digital payments, right? Maybe telegraphing instructions across the world to pay money, but there wasn't really any digital payment. So it wasn't created, even though it stands to this day and underpins all money and financial instruments. It wasn't created with digital money in mind. So they're playing in a playing field where actually they're making the rules up as they go along, and it's not really as strengthened in law as they would like it to be. Okay? Your note is, right? As I say, Lord Denning declared it as cash, as good as cash, so therefore to be treated as cash, right? Like I said earlier, they have to bring this to you, right, this original note, in order to claim on it, right? So if you put down there, I'll give you £50 a month, right, plus 5% of that on top of that £50, right? Only as a gesture of goodwill. You don't have to, with a promissory note, add interest, but it's a gesture of goodwill, right? And you're doing a lot of these bits that I've added to this are gestures of goodwill and extra layers of security. They're not actually all requirements of the Bills of Exchange Act. And I'll get to that bit in a minute, the signatory witness bit. Right, so you're saying £50, yes, you need to come and collect it from me, yeah? And I'll give you that on the doorstep on production of this original promissory note. I've got to mention the top right hand corner there, note number. You make up that number, any number you want to. Now, if I was writing a promissory note, I would use my initials, DS, I would use the date, I don't know, today's the 20th, isn't it? So it'd be DS 20082301. 01 being the first note of that day. 02 would be the second note of that day, right? It can be anything though. It's your number, it's your reference number, you make it up, you put whatever you want. Combination of letters, numbers, whatever, however. And when you do that, you put that, and you've got a template here of the letter you send with it. You, when it says, "Dear Sir or Madam, please find enclosed a promissory note," in brackets there, number, and you write that number in. So that ties that note to that cover note and explains to them what the payment is for. Right, so you said I'll give you £50 a month. Like I said earlier, you can't buy your shopping in Tesco with a photocopy of a £20 note or a £50 note. You've got to take the original. Well, these companies, they got rid of their manual collection services a long time ago in favour of a digital service because it was so much easier. Saved a fortune, closed that department down. Well, more fool you, because legally I can use this and make you come and collect it from me. Or if you don't come and collect it from me, that's on you, not on me, right? But also, can you imagine a bank, right, with a promissory note worth, I don't know, £100,000, right, trusting this to a collection agent they don't know? Somebody they've never met before at an agency. They've got to leave that. That's like you leaving all of your money in their possession to get them to collect on something. Do you know what I mean? This is the asset. This is the value. Without that, if that falls in a puddle and gets destroyed or gets lost, then they can't say, "Oh, I can have another one." No. Yeah. Just like if I lose 50 quid in the street, I can't go to the Bank of England and say, "Can I have another one? I lost that one. Can I have a replacement?" I'll say, "No." Well, it's the same with your note, right? The same with your note. Your note is just as good as a bank note. Just as good. Yeah? Value, exactly the same. Worth its face value. And only in faith alone, in fiat. Yeah? Faith alone. So you can legitimately, now the reason why we treat banknotes with such respect, for want of a better word, is because of the faith we put in it, right? And the bank that backs it, and the government that backs it and says it's got value, we say it has. Right? So it exists on faith alone. Other than that, it's just a piece of paper with some ink on it and some fancy holograms, right? So, if you copy a banknote, you're committing an offence, right? But that offence is nothing more than a copyright offence. That's all it is. It's a copyright offence, like copying somebody's music or a movie or something, right? Because if they copied your banknote, your note, your promissory note, they're also committing an offence. It's exactly the same. Works the other way around too. Okay, it's still fraud. If you're trying to pass it off, I can photocopy a £20 note, right? It's difficult to print it out because printers are wired in such a way to detect banknotes. And if they do, they refuse to print them. They print a little bit of it. I don't know if anyone's ever tried it, have they? Right, prints about that much of it, right? Of a note about that size, it prints about that much, and a message saying it can't be printed. And all printers now are programmed to be that way, to start counterfeiting. Right? Try scanning and printing out a banknote, and you'll see it'll come up with a website. You go onto that website and it explains that you're not allowed to, it's copyright, blah blah blah. So, equally, as I say, they can't copy yours either. So you've agreed to pay them a certain amount each month. You've said you'll give them a little bit of interest on top of that. And you choose what day, whether it's the 1st of the month, the 15th of the month, the 30th of the month. Your choice. And then until the obligation has been fulfilled, the payment can be obtained by the holder at, and that's where you would put the address where they can obtain it. So your home address, work address, whatever. I hereby give permission to the holder and or the holder in due course of this promissory note to use this note in any way necessary as a negotiable instrument to be financially traded on, whereas such trade shall terminate the obligation herein. So when this note gets sold, right, it can no longer be collected on the payment schedule from you, okay? That's not what it's sold for anyway, so nobody really cares about that. It's sold, as I said, for fractional reserve banking, not to collect payments, to settle it, because the moment it's been settled, it exists, it ceases to exist. Just like your mortgage, right? You get a £200,000 mortgage. If you pay back every penny of that £2,000, that disappears off of the books, and only the interest that was collected exists, right? So they get to keep the interest. So by not ever claiming on this, they keep this active all the time, right? This will always then have value, and it can always be traded, and they're sold as big bundles, usually worth millions of billions. They sell them for like pennies on the pound. And you could say, well, hang on, I paid my mortgage. You created the money with your signature when you signed a mortgage agreement. And a mortgage agreement, again, is another type of promissory note. It contains the amount owed, the payment schedule, the interest applied, etc., etc. Some promissory notes I've seen actually are quite wrong, okay? And those are ones that say that you promise to pay on the understanding that the Bank of England make good on their obligation, right? Which basically says if they can honour their banknotes, then I'll honour with their banknotes. Well, that creates a condition, right? And you can't have a condition in a promissory note, because a promissory note is an unconditional promise to pay certain in cash. That's how it's defined. So if you add a condition to it, say, basically what I'm saying is they should be able to come to your house with the original promissory note and collect their, say, £50, right, plus the interest. Yeah. If you then say to them, oh no, you can't have that now, yeah, because the Bank of England haven't made good on their promise on their notes yet, yeah, because, you know, they don't exist in reality, they're backed by nothing, blah, blah, blah. Well, you created a condition, you said, you know, they've completed what was they were supposed to do, which was come to you and issue the note to receive the payment. If you're getting out of it by saying, oh no, I'm not going to pay you until the Bank of England, then you've created a condition, which means it's not a legitimate promissory note and it holds no value at all. Okay? So don't add conditions to them. To say, now you could argue, well, hang on, isn't a payment schedule a condition? No, it's not really a condition. Right? It's saying this note has value the entire time. Right? It doesn't gain in value bit by bit in small increments as and when I pay you. Okay? It retains its value at all times. So they don't need the banknotes. They've got this. They can keep that on their books. They can add that figure to their bookkeeping and inflate their bookkeeping by the face value of this note. Yes.
Are you saying that once you've filled that promissory note in, you wouldn't actually have to pay it monthly? You just do that.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because you're making it economically unviable for them to collect on it, right? Why would I collect £50 a month if it's going to cost me £100 a month to pay somebody, an agency, to pay an agent, right, to come with this note. And why would I trust an agency or an agent I don't know with a valuable asset worth, say, £200,000? I wouldn't. I would need to take it myself, so I know it's in my possession, right? And it's got to be worthwhile me doing it, right? A lot of these companies, or where this will end up, are many miles away, sometimes thousands of miles away, in another country even, yeah? Operating in tax havens and whatever. So they're not interested in collecting on it. It's now an asset which they've inflated their bookkeeping by, and so now fractional reserve banking, they can lend even more money, they can make even more money. So it's worthwhile to them to do it. However, they will always reject it, guarantee every single time. There'll never be a situation where you send off your promissory note and you get a letter back saying, oh, thank you very much, all paid, all settled, all ticked off. It's not going to happen, but it doesn't matter, right? When they respond to you, to your promissory note, to tell you that they don't accept your promissory note, what they don't realise is they're actually saying, I acknowledge receipt of the promissory note, which fulfils the third obligation of the Bills of Exchange Act, which is delivery. You can prove you created it, you've got a photocopy of it. You can prove you signed it, you've got a photocopy of it. You can prove you delivered it because you've got the recorded delivery information. What happens in their internal mail system is up to them. That's their problem, not yours. Oh yeah, but Bob in accounts, he didn't get it. He went to Shirley in the new accounts department. Well, that's not my problem. Your internal mail systems are not my issue. The Bills of Exchange Act doesn't say you've got to make sure Bob gets it in order for it to be legitimate. Okay? You just have to make sure it's delivered. And once you've made sure it's delivered, it's their issue, it's their problem. And all that matters is that you've settled it in law. You're going to get rejection, you're going to get a fight on your hand in some cases. In other cases, they will know that it's legitimate and it can be used. However, they'll still reject it, and then you'll find that they'll just stop chasing you for it. Yeah, they'll just stop chasing you for the debt because they don't want to admit to it. Now, you could say, well, is there any reported cases? Well, there's cases everywhere, right, of people using promissory notes. They're legitimately used, they're protected, they're written in law, they're written in the legislation. There's case law, as I say, that protects its use as cash, or declares it as cash, right? So they have value, there's no denying that. Yeah? You can't deny that fact. It's about arguing whether they're entitled to argue about payment preference. But if they are arguing payment preference, you have got the ace card, because yours is the only one that promises to pay in banknotes, in legal tender, i.e. minted coins and banknotes. That's the only type of money that is considered legal tender. Right? When you pay with a debit card, that's not legal tender. That's for a demand for legal tender, but it's still, again, not a demand for legal tender. It's a demand for digits on a screen to transfer from that screen to that screen. Yeah? Banknotes and minted coins don't even come into it. So all of their promises to pay that they demand from you have nothing at all to do with legal tender. Yours is the only one that does. Because it says, I'm going to give it to you in legal tender, in your hand, completing my obligation, that's it. Right? Like I say, you're going to get it rejected every time. If you're going to waste your time sending them to councils for council tax, then you really are wasting your energy, because they're just going to completely ignore it and just stress you out of all the time taken to correspond with them. Just don't correspond with them. Have nothing to do with them. Like I say, they've never taken a thing from me, never taken a penny from me, never had anything from me more than 30 seconds of my time. That's all they've had, maximum. Yes?
I sent a promissory note to the council tax, and so I sent it, and then my wife cancelled, we took another payment out, and then my wife cancelled the direct debit, and I've not heard anything for 5 months.
Yeah, but that's because all the time they have the ability to take money out, they'll take money out, you better believe it. right? Take away that ability to take money out, and they've got nothing. They've literally got nothing. Nothing. There's no way of getting any money out of you. All they can do is send fierce-looking bullies out to your home. And if you know how to deal with them...
Well, I've had nobody visit me out or anything, so...
Yeah, probably not. But that's not to say that that would never happen. Do you know what I mean? It just hasn't happened so far. However, a lot more, they're a lot busier than they used to be because there's a lot more people defaulting on a lot more things these days, especially when it comes to things like council tax, but also energy as well because of the high cost of living. Yes, I love it.
I did a function as well, and I got a response saying, thank you for your payment. You will let me know if you want to do this. So when I went to the, then I got an email from the debt collector. So then I got there, and then I went to look through the email that was sent me, it's gone. So I'd sent the email to my cousin's wife. So then I sent notes and all my paperwork back to the CEO that sent back to and sent it back to them, and I then...
Yeah, well, they know they're operating on a scam. They know they're operating a scam, right? Because they know there's no contract with council tax. There's no contract exists for council tax. The gas bill. Well, again, no, it's about if you're refusing to declare yourself as the trustee of your birth trust, then they must then go to the Crown Corporation. And of course they know they can't go to the Crown and say, this is why the Crown created the law about statute barred debt. Right? Debt, when it goes over 6 years old, if it hasn't been successfully chased in that 6 years since the last interaction, so the last payment was made, or demand for payment, then it becomes statute barred, right? And that's what that means is, although it still kind of exists on paper, it doesn't any longer appear on your credit file, and it also cannot be, you can't be harassed for it, you can't be chased for it. So they can send you a letter and say, please could you pay, just as a gesture of goodwill, and if you wanted to, you can say, yeah, go on then, I feel a bit sorry for you, bless you. But generally, no, they wipe the debt off. And the reason they do that is because otherwise the Crown have got to pay for it. The Crown don't want to pay for it because they're the only other trustees. If they're not getting satisfaction from that trustee, they have to go to another trustee. And if they run out of trustees, that trust has to be closed down, right? Because a trust has to have those three elements. All trusts have to have those three elements. The grantor / settlor, the trustee, and the beneficiary. And they all have to work in the benefit of the beneficiary, right? Well, they're a beneficiary, and they're a trustee, and they're a settlor, right? So if you say, no, I'm none of those things, who do they go to? They go to the trustee, the only one being the Crown. So the Crown redeems itself again, just like it does with its own police officers when, they commit certain offences in uniform. They completely diminish themselves of all responsibility by, putting certain terms and conditions on it. And they do the same with debt, because they don't want to settle it. Instead, they say, right, well, you've got 6 years to chase that fella over there. Yeah, and if you can't chase him, if you can't get it, then that's it. The debt is kind of wiped off. It's not really wiped off, still exists, but it can't be pursued anymore. That's the difference. Okay, so you sign a date list, right? Now you'll notice there's 2 dates on there, and that's because one date is for when you created the note, the other date is when you sign the note. You sign it in front of a witness, a signatory witness. Now the signatory witness isn't actually a requirement of the Bills of Exchange Act. Okay, this is added just as an extra level of security, right? Because what you're saying is, I want you to take this seriously, right? You could, if you wanted to, print this out without that, right? You could cut that bit off there, right, and just issue the top half of it, where it says, just below where it says the original promissory note is signed in blue ink. Now, that means you're issuing it as that, Okay, so if you can't find somebody to signature witness it, and it doesn't have to be a notary public or anything like that, because like I say, it's not a requirement of the Bills of Exchange Act. Therefore, you're just saying that I can never deny I created this. Yeah, that's all a signature witness is to say, if I ever denied creating this because you came to me and produced it and I said, nothing to do with me, yeah, you've got somebody else to go and check with and say, did you witness them sign that? And they say, yeah, I did. You go, there you go, then it's legitimate. I can now take this into court. So that's all it is. But you're never going to deny its existence. You created it for a reason. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter, right? But if you add that, it's a gesture of goodwill. And you only ever do anything in these situations, right, by thinking of it as pleasing a judge, not the claimant. Okay, you're only ever trying to please the judge, so you have to act like there's a judge sitting on your shoulder at all times, right? So would the judge be impressed with that? Well, yes, he would, because it's not a requirement, but you've added that anyway for extra security, right? You've applied an official stamp. Now that could be any official stamp. I've got my own one, which I bought personalised from eBay. Just a simple, cost me a tenner, and it's got my Peace Officers UK logo on it, right, for a tenner. Just send them the image, they laser cut it, a few days later you receive it, and you can stamp as many promissory notes as you want, right? So, witness can be anybody, be your best mate, your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, your boss, police officer, council worker, whoever, doesn't matter. As long as they've got some kind of official stamp. And it can just be their initials even, right? Or if you can't find somebody or you don't want to bother with that, chop that bit off there. How you issue it is how you issue it, right? And how you then photocopy it. So you can issue that, like I say, you could fold that back. You could issue it essentially like that. It says there, yes, I can see where it says void if removed, but that means if you cut this bit out, you're voiding it. Right? How you issue the certificate is how it's meant to remain in that condition. So like I say, you can do that, you can add that, you can stamp that. If you haven't got a stamp, or you can't afford £10, get a potato, carve your initials in, use that. Yeah, be anything.
How do you sign it? Compact form. Compact form, the signature.
Signature, your normal signature, how you would sign a cheque or you know, an autograph, or you don't do any of that, no. Because that is supposed to represent your living being status. You're not a living being, you're a trustee when you're doing this. You're a trustee. Living beings got nothing to do with trustees. Right?
What ink you writing? What colour ink you use?
It doesn't. A lot of people think it does, but then again, they argue it on the basis of living being acting, you know, trying to settle this liability, but they've got no place settling liabilities. Living beings have no liabilities. Okay, they have no liabilities. Only dead entities have liabilities. Legal fictions have liabilities. It's a fact. It's a simple fact. Right? So you're signing it as if you would, you know, just like your autograph, just like you would do at the bank or on a cheque, yeah, a normal signature. Right? As I say, you're not declaring yourself as a living being from the family of, etc., etc. You are the trustee of that birth trust. So the name of that birth trust, the date of birth of that birth trust, and here's the signature of the trustee of that birth trust. Right? That's how you play it. So,
Can I ask another question?
yes, you can.
Does it matter what paper? If I were to say use this as my promissory note and just photocopy like to send everywhere else, would that be good enough?
Right, so the thing about bond certificates, because that's essentially what a promissory note is, just like a bank note, they're all bond certificates, trust certificates, right? All based on faith. The general legal protocol is to use watermarked paper, special paper, what's it called? Not lined, is it? So if you look up at that, some of them have got a Conqueror, it's got the watermark. Some of them are Basildon Bond, it depends on which paper you're using. But you can get just Google Basildon Bond watermarked A4 paper, or just watermarked A4 paper. You'll pay probably about £5 for about 50 sheets. Be about somewhere between 5 and 10 quid for about 50 sheets. That gives you 50 potential promissory notes. Not that you'll ever need that many. Right, so you issue this promissory note. You send with this promissory note index is just for your records only. So you write on there the date you issued it, the name of the recipient, so the holder of the note number, the amount it was for, and there's a bit there that says notes. You can scribble any notes that you want. The notes could just be to say what it's to do with, mortgage or car finance or so on and so forth. But this is for your records. Right. As I say, once you've got this done, you've got it filled out, you've signed it. Obviously, the signature of on the note, your signature, the date of that has to match the date of the signatory witness, otherwise that's just weird. They witnessed it on a different day to when you signed it. It's, doesn't make any sense. So I have been signatory witness to lots of people before, where they'll send me some notes and I'll fill it out, stamp it, but I won't put the date. Yeah, and I'll send it back to them. You can sign it and whatever. Nobody can prove otherwise. So so be it. And if they come to me and say, "Did this person sign this note?" I'll say, "Yeah." I'll sort of do it. Prove otherwise. You're going to commit fraud, so am I. Right. So you send them this note after you photocopied it, right? But you send it to them by a tracked mail service. So I would generally use Royal Mail special delivery next day by 1 p.m, which costs about £7, but it's guaranteed to get there by the next day. You've got all the tracking information. You've even got a photograph of the image of the signature. Yes. Right. Never send it to a person's name. Okay. First and foremost. Okay. So if you ascertain that the accounts manager is Bob Smith, don't send it to Bob Smith. Send it to accounts manager, right? Because Bob Smith might not work there tomorrow, right? But the accounts manager will. Okay, the role will still. So you address it to the job title rather than the individual, because like I say, they either might not be working there, or they've moved up to another department, etc., etc. So yeah, you send it to them. And you send it obviously with your covering letter, which has all your information. You put their address from your address, the date, the as in regarding. So if it was, not that I'm suggesting you should pay for council tax with them, but if you were going to, you would put their council tax. If it's mortgage. If it's for credit card, credit card. The account and reference number, obviously, that they use for your account, and the amount outstanding. And again, like I said, it says there, please find enclosed a promissory note number and a blank space. That's where you would put your promissory note number, so it attaches those two documents together. Take a photocopy of that as well. Okay, so you know exactly what you can prove. Take a photocopy of everything you correspond with them, right, for your records. Like I say, they will reject it, but so be it, doesn't matter.
Let's just say on I am paid for a certain amount of rent. Should I promissory note that, right?
Well, promissory note can be used to settle any liability. Any liability. The only time you would have difficulty with a promissory note is you couldn't go into Sainsbury's and say, I want to buy, a bag of chips and some tins of beans with this promissory note, right? Because if you haven't established a debt yet, you haven't left the store and owed it. If they allowed you to have a tick list so you could, put it on the slate, then you could settle it with a promissory note. right? But you can't do it at that particular time because it's not a debt, it's not a liability until you've left the store. But by the time you've left the store, you've settled the liability already, so it doesn't establish as a debt. But any debt, right, any liability, you can use a promissory note for, regardless of what it is. Criminal fines, credit
Is it probably
cards.
better to use a credit card then?
Sorry?
It's probably better to use a credit card.
Right, well again, a credit card is an unsecured debt, right? Use it for secured debt. If you want to use it for a credit card, of course you can, right? Now the thing is, you can't use it for the credit card and then continue to use the credit card, right? So you could use it to pay for your defaulted credit card. You could default on the credit card and then, because credit cards are covered by the Consumer Credit Act, right? And in the Consumer Credit Act, it clearly states that, I think it was something like section 123 or something like that. But it clearly states within the Consumer Credit Act that negotiable instruments cannot be used to settle credit card debt, right? However, when you default on the credit card and they cancel the card,
Does that mean you shut it down? To default it means to shut it down.
Yeah, to not pay it, to not abide by the payment terms and conditions, right? Contract terms. So you default on it, they cancel your card, so you can't use your card now. Plus the fact you're over the limit anyway, so you couldn't use it anyway. But they cancel your card, right? And then they pass it on to a collection agent, right? What they've really done is they've sold it onto a collection agent. Okay, they're not really acting as an agent for them, right? Because credit card companies do this. Chances are they haven't even got your original contract. They'll have a scanned copy of your original contract, but they won't have the original copy because that would have been securitized a long time ago, right? And sold on and so on and so forth. When it's a defaulted debt, right, it's no longer a credit card debt, it's a defaulted debt, default liability, right? Which means once it's defaulted and therefore the contract breached, the Consumer Credit Act no longer applies, right? And because the Consumer Credit Act no longer applies, because it's not now active, currently active, it means you can now use a promissory note to settle that liability. Right, but it's specifically laid out, and it's to stop you from going, oh, I've got £10,000 limit, I'm going to spend that and then pay it with the promissory note, and then go and spend another £10,000 and pay it with another. It's to stop that. Right? They class that as fraud. How dare they? How dare they?
Could you, alright then, say you did that, right? You thought you first gone down because you've gone over the limits with the default.
Yeah.
Could you then say, reinstate yourself?
Get a new
Could
credit
you
card.
like get a new credit card?
You get a different credit card, yeah, of course you
But
can.
not of that same company.
No, but that will only be anyway for a maximum of 6 years from the default, right? Because after it's statute barred, basically years ago I had a Capital One card, and I defaulted on it, and they tried chasing me for it with Lowell Finance, I think it was, Lowell Portfolio or whatever. And I just kept ignoring them and ignoring them and ignoring them. And then after 6 years, 6 or 7 years, I applied for another Capital One card and got it. You know? Because it only lasts for 6 years. And it goes off of your credit record after 6 years. So you no longer have to worry about it. Do you know what I mean? So, as I said, if you're not benefiting from it immediately,
Get as many cards as you can at one time. Use them all.
yeah.
But also after
Yeah.
3 months, they claim it like a short sale.
Yeah, they do, they claim it. They have to have made some kind of reasonable attempt to get the money in the first place from you, but if they're unsuccessful, then obviously it's securitized, so they can make a claim on it. But also, the original contract, the promissory note, right, that created the money in the first place for the credit, still has value. Right? And because it's not been settled and never will be settled, it will remain having value. So it will be sold, bought and sold on the international markets as a security bond certificate. That's what it will exist as, and it will exist purely on faith alone, that's it. Yeah? It's just like, think of it like, if I sold you this piece of paper for £1, that piece of paper is now worth £1, right? Even if you say, well, I could buy a piece of paper for a penny. Doesn't matter, this one is worth £1 because that's what you paid for it. Works the same with a painting. If you're a painting, it's not worth anything. It's only worth the faith that's put into the value of it, right? And only because it was traded, that painting was sold for £10 million, which means that painting is now worth £10 million. No, it's not. It's still worth just being a painting. It's just paint and canvas and a frame. It's worth nothing other than the value of the materials used. Right? So the value comes from the faith you put into it. Yeah? And you just trust that it has faith. That's why trust is used and faith is used in finance. Right? It's such, in the legal terms, because it's all based on faith and trust. They trust that you're going to honour the contract. If you don't, they go to the judge and go, oh, judge, they didn't honour the contract. Can we have some money? Right? So, if you just ignore all that and say, well, you speak to the judge speaks to you, I'm not going to be there. Oh, yeah, but we're going to get, well, how are you going to get the money out of me? How are you going to do it? Well, because he said, yeah, but what can he do to me? What's the ultimate thing he can do to me? Well, he can issue a CCJ against you. It's not against me, is it? It's against a birth trust. I'm not a birth trust. I'm a human being. Do you know what I mean? So it's about how you perceive that birth trust and all liabilities attached to that birth trust and all ownership of properties attached to that birth trust. Okay? If you disclaim that you are that person, then you're not that person. Simple as that. If you're saying, I'm not that person, that's not me. Yeah? Even if they go, with you were that person yesterday, yeah, well, yesterday I was. Yeah? Yesterday I was. Because I needed to go and get some shopping, so I had to be that one. Right? However, today I've decided I'm a unicorn. Be whatever you want to be. That's what they keep telling us. He, him, they, them, their, what bloody idiot. Do you know what I mean? And so if they're saying you can be anything you want to be, okay, well I want to be a unicorn. Not a birth trust. Not a trustee, thank you very much. Until it benefits me to do so. When it benefits me to do so, of course I'll be the birth trust. That's how I pay for my shopping. That's how I pay for my Amazon and Netflix and whatever else I want to get. That benefits me. Yes, sorry, you've had your hand up a lot. Sorry, you must do.
Okay, Mark, just give you the question. When you're working out an instalment, it says until the obligation's been fulfilled. So does that mean, you calculate roughly when you think you're going to stop it, make sure it's not more than 20 years or something?
No, it doesn't make any difference, right? No, lifespans have no place in the realms of the dead. Lifespans are for the living, not the dead. That's why, at 55 years old, tomorrow I could go to a letting agent and get a 99-year lease. I'm not going to live to 154, am I? But it doesn't matter. Because in the world of legal, dead entities, there is no lifespan, there is no ages of lifespans. Right? So it makes no difference whatsoever. No.
Is that why they keep increasing the pension for death? There's no time span at all.
Well, they keep doing that because they can. Just because they can. Because they control it. They manage it. They're the managers of everybody's birth trust. It's all a fraud. Like I say, if the Centre KB Act 1666 is a fraud, which it is, because they know we're not dead, they know we're not beyond the seas. I can't even swim that well, to be honest. So don't know why they're assuming I'm beyond the seas. So if they know we're not beyond the seas, then they know they're lying. Right? They know they're lying, and therefore they're not acting in good faith or honour. Right? Therefore, it's fraud and it's null and void. Right? So you could argue it null and void, but who do you argue it to? That's the question. It's been legislation for hundreds of years, and it underpins everything in society. Everything comes down to the Centre KB Act of 1666. And if you believe that the Great Fire of London was started by a hot coal in a baking and pudding lane, then I have an awful lot of snake oil to sell you. Okay? Because you'll be convinced of anything. I can tell you they needed to burn the churches, because the churches is where all the birth, deaths and marriage records were kept. And if they could get rid of those and destroy all copies of those, or certainly enough of them to say, do you know what, we don't know who's alive and who's dead now, so we're just going to say everybody's dead. If you're not dead, come forward, step forward, you've got 7 years, start the clock now.
You know the 7 years, so like my grandson's 27, how do you know this?
Well, like I said, they created a trap, so you can't, can you? Because like I said earlier, to claim you're a living being, you've got to tell a dead entity that, right? Which means you're a dead entity, yeah? Because you're communicating with a dead entity. So it's a clever little trap, right? That's why it's such a clever fraud. But it's fraud all the same. And if that's fraud, everything that was based upon it is also fraud. Everything that was based because of it was also fraud. And everything in society, and as consumers, right, we've all been defrauded. Right? We've all been defrauded because they still think we're dead, or they still claim we're dead, and they know we're not. Right? They know we're not. So if that's a fraud, everything based on that is a fraud. And the whole of society is based on that. So it's fundamentally the most important act that has ever been created, is the 1666 Certificate Via.
An 11-year-old kid said tonight, he said, I don't understand how the fight every year kids do it. Right. Yeah.
They did when I was at school, everybody, yeah.
And he said, I don't understand, he said, because they were fighting with the tent, how did it burn down and it's like,
Well, this is, you see, what they claimed was some people perished in the fire, others drowned, which is how they came after beyond the seas, because they jumped into the Thames and were washed out beyond the seas. And so we don't know who it was, because we didn't keep a record, because it sprung up on us, that damn baker dropping his coals. Yeah, dropping his coals, burning down London. We weren't expecting it, you know. Just like Maui, weren't expecting that. I mean, yeah, we would use it direct energy weapons, but let's forget about that.
Isaac Newton discovered the gravity the same year.
Say again?
Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton.
66, the same year.
Yeah, but he probably realised the bullshit had dropped. That's what it was, and figured out why. Right, so any other questions? Yes, my lovely.
So how successful are these promissory notes? What have you personally...
Well, I have no secure debts, so I personally have no liabilities. I sent one off on behalf of my other half for £11,200 defaulting credit card. They of course rejected the note. Well, no, they didn't actually reject it. What they did is their solicitors sent a letter to say, thank you for your letter dated blah blah blah. Unfortunately, it's nothing to do. It's subject to a court order, so therefore a county court judgment. So therefore, you'd need to fill in form N245 and submit it to the court. And blah blah. That was that, right? They made no mention at all of the promissory note itself, right? So I looked up N245, and N245 is the form that says, I can't afford to pay, say, £50 a month, can I pay £20 a month, please? And the judge goes, go on then. Yeah, you can now pay £20 a month. You filled out your form, brilliant. However, form N443 is the form that I promote, which is for a certificate of satisfaction / cancellation, right? Which basically, if it goes to county court judgment, you contact the issuing court, right? However, the problem again with this is that the application you have to send to Northampton, right, the County Court Business Centre, Bulk Processing Centre, right? They have no legally qualified staff there at all, right? So I sent off the form, waited ages, only literally, I think it was just over a week ago, got a response where they said they were, they have no record of this, so they're contacting the claimant, and if they don't respond within 30 days, then a certificate of satisfaction will automatically be issued by the computer. However, if they contest it, then it won't be issued, right? So now the next step is to take it to an actual county court, right, and say, right, here's the settlement, can you now quash that liability, please, right? Because these people at your business centre, right, nobody's there qualified, nobody can give you legal advice. If you bring them up and say, so what do I do? They say, we can't give you legal advice, right? That's what they do. And they do it because they want you to just shut up, go away and pay it. Simple as that, right? Don't put up any resistance or any fight. And when somebody says to me, don't put up any resistance or any fight, that's when I put up a resistance and start kicking and screaming, right? So, yeah, the next process now is to, they haven't said, no, that's not acceptable, but at the same time, they haven't said, yes, that's acceptable. What they've said is, I don't know. That's essentially what they've said. Don't know. We'll contact the claimant and see what they say. Well, of course, the claimant's going to say, no, we don't accept that promissory note. Yeah, I imagine they are going to respond, right, because they're acting on behalf, the solicitor's acting on behalf of. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because it's an unsecured debt, right? So ultimately, it doesn't really matter. However, if I want, or she wants, can take it to the courts, right? When it comes to a secured debt, here's how you deal with it, right, with a mortgage. So a lot of people, they say, I'm not going to pay my mortgage, right? I'm going to cancel my direct debit and I'm going to demand that they provide the original contract and etc., right? That can get very messy. And I've seen so much footage of people losing their homes. Like I say, one literally a couple of days ago. Lovely lady called Laura. Lost her home a couple of days ago.
Can't they just take it back?
Well, this is, I mean, I had a long conversation with her on the phone afterwards. Because she was seeking my advice. I said to her, I never advise people to cancel their direct debit. Don't do that. What you do, if you're paying your mortgage, do the promissory note, issue the promissory note, send it to them, get your proof of sending it, and then wait till they take the next payment, right? And when they take the next payment, you contact them, ring them up, write to them, email them, whatever, contact them and say, you seem to have taken the payment in error here because I've settled this with a promissory note, right? Can I have it back, please? Of course, they're going to say, no, you can't have it back. We, as far as we're concerned, we don't accept your promise, blah, blah, blah. Nonsense, right? In which case then, you start a small claims process in the county court for that one payment that they took, okay? Not the whole debt or anything like that, because like I say, the claim or the amount you pay to take it to court is staggered. If it's, I think, up to a couple of £100, I think it's a £35 fee, which jumps to about £65 if it's for up to £1,000 and so on and so forth, and then it gets into percentages and etc. So to take somebody to court for, say, 10 grand is going to probably cost you a couple of grand up front in order to get the application processed, right? So I say keep it as minimal as possible. So make the claim for the amount taken from you because it was taken unlawfully, unjustly, illegally, sorry. It was taken illegally, unjustly, because you've made the payment, you've made the settlement, then you're controlling the situation then, it's not controlling you, right? You haven't stopped payments, so they're going to still keep taking payments, but don't worry about them while you're waiting to go to court, because it's going to take a good few months, 6 months, maybe even a year to get to court. Let them carry on taking the payments. You're only claiming that one, because when you win that one on the basis of the law and what it states, right? And your perfectly legitimate reasoning for issuing your promissory note. When you win that claim, you then ask them for all those payments back again. And if they refuse, then obviously they know they're going to be liable in court. They were liable for the first one, they're liable for the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on, right? Any other payments they take. So then they would need to return those payments to you. You can then request the judge issue a directive of the court for them to correct the land registry. Okay? Once all that's done, once you've got an order, right, that's when you cancel your direct debit, because now you've got an order that says you legitimately paid, right, an order that agreed with you, right, that you legitimately paid, therefore there is no claim, liability claim for the mortgage itself, only for the promissory note, or the debt that exists within the promissory note, which is an unsecured debt, it's not secured on property, right? And you're saying, if you bring that to me, the original, I'll honour it, happily honour it. And if you were paying £200, £300, £400, £500 a month for your mortgage, right? And you're saying now, I'll give you £50 a month, keep £50 aside, just in case they ever decide just to test you to see if they can get you to dishonour the note, right? Because ultimately then they could go to court and say, oh, the note's not valid, that's why we reject it, because we went to collect on it and he dishonoured it, right? If they brought the original promissory note, right, now, of course, they're not going to do that, but they could do that if they wanted. If they thought, well, this is a little loophole for us, we get them to dishonour the note by turning off unexpectedly, producing the note, and they haven't got the money, right? We can then go to court and say, we want the original liability, that note, therefore it hasn't settled the mortgage. So all the time they've got that option, just keep 50 quid aside, yeah, plus 5% of 50 quid aside, yeah.
So do you know anyone that's actually going through this process at the moment?
With a mortgage, I don't know. A lot of people are using these promissory notes of council tax, and I keep saying to people, don't even bother. It's pointless using it for council tax. Yeah, it's a futile effort. First of all, there's no liability to settle in the first place. So why you're even bothering with them? There's no contract, so they have no power to enforce it unless you create a contract. And of course, when they get you to a court, right? My friend Rob and the Portsmouth crew down in Portsmouth, the freedom fighters down there, he said to me he put in a DSAR for his court appearance, right, to the council. And they sent him the information, right, with his details listed on the allegedly liability order. And there was, he said there was over 6,000 names on there, right? 6,000 names that were all summoned on the same day to the same court at the same time, right? So that is your first red flag, yeah, that it's a fraud. Because no court will issue 6,000 or at least 6,000 summonses for the same day, because they know they can't possibly get through them, right? I went to court just over a week and a half ago, as a Mackenzie friend, legal advisor for somebody, right, over a speeding offence. It's the case has been adjourned to February because he didn't get a chance to go in, because there were 7 cases booked that day for that particular court, right, and they got through one. That took all morning and all afternoon, one case, right? That's when they've summoned 7 people, right? So they're never going to summon 6,000 people. It's just not possible, right? And a summons is supposed to be a legitimate summons from a legitimate court for a legitimate dead entity to be summoned, or their spirit to be summoned before them, right? So they don't issue them, it's the council that issue them. It's a nonsense, it's a lie, it's a fraud. It doesn't exist in reality. And if it doesn't exist in reality, why the hell do you pay with a promissory note? you know. So most people are paying them promissory notes. Not so many people are doing the mortgage thing. However, some are, but they're only just starting the process, so it's too early to tell yet. But there is a telling sign, right? Because there have been stories that have made mainstream media previously in the past. One in 2015 that was based in Ireland, they were supposed to follow up. The newspaper was supposed to follow up the story, because what was interesting is this guy had settled his sister's mortgage with a promissory note, right? And the Bank of Ireland claimed that they don't accept promissory notes. So he went to court to see if he had a case against them, and the judge's job was just basically to say yes, whether they can go to court or not, right, or whether it's, you know, fit for a trial or not. So the judge agreed with the guy by saying that he had a very good case to take it to court, right? So he authorised the case to go ahead. And of course the newspaper was supposed to follow it up, but they never did. You can find the reporter on Twitter, which I did, and I asked the question, as did lots of other people who wanted to know since 2015, and he's never responded to anybody, right? Never responded to the question, what happened? So you can tell the story was buried, right? Because this guy's claim was, Bank of Ireland accepted a promissory note from the Irish government to the tune of 38 billion euros. So where are they getting off saying they don't accept promissory notes, right? You'll find with most banks and lenders, credit cards, Capital One is one of them, right? If you Google Capital One promissory note, you'll get a page come up, right, telling you all about, this will be a Capital on their website, telling you all about promissory notes and how useful they can be, right? Same for, I think it was Santander, I looked up for somebody else. Santander promissory note, was it Santander or Co-op? Cooperative. So I put in cooperative promissory note, they've got a page that says about the benefits of using promissory note, but this is for their business customers, right, that they're promoting the use of bills of exchange and promissory notes to, saying that they can be useful tools in the world of business, right? So they can't deny a promissory note, yeah? Because what they're doing is applying prejudice. They're saying, well, accept his promissory note, but we won't accept yours. Well, then there's no liability, because with a debt, you must accept a legitimate payment method. And this is a legitimate payment method. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're stating there is no real liability. I just want some money. I just want some cash. Yeah? So you follow it through, right? You're covered by the law, but it will involve a fight. Like I say, it's just if you do it that way that I explained with a mortgage, you don't get bailiffs coming around your door trying to evict you, going to the High Court, eviction warrants, starting that process, right? And what would generally happen is, if you did cancel your direct debit, right, before getting to a court, they will wait it out for the 3 months, the 90 days, right, where it then gets classed as a default worthy of eviction, right, and they can make applications. They will, it will appear that, oh, I haven't heard back from them, so nothing's happened. They've obviously accepted it, or no, they haven't. They're working behind the scenes, they're just not telling you. They're putting in their applications and not giving you the right opportunity to deal with it, right? So, as I say, this is another way round where you don't risk anything at the end of the day. You don't risk anything at all. You don't risk losing your home because you haven't cancelled any payments. What you've done is you've made a settlement and they continue taking the old payment method for the old debt, which no longer exists. So that's a separate issue to the promissory note. It's a separate issue now. That's actually, you're stealing from me now. Because that debt doesn't exist. And if that debt doesn't exist, then you're taking money from me unlawfully. Illegally, rather, not unlawfully. Illegally. Right? So that's how you deal with it. You follow the court process, get your result, then cancel it. Then claim all your liabilities back that they've taken from you in the process since you issued the promissory note.
What happened with Laura?
Laura, well, she's now looking into how to get back into the property, and she's a feisty girl, so she won't give up. She won't give up. I only wish it had come to me a long time ago before deciding to just do it this way, cancel that, and argue this, and because honestly, these people are ruthless. Do you know what I mean? And again, I wish before somebody had advised her how to deal with them in relation to saying to them, well, go back to the court then and tell the judge, and see what the judge does. That's your remedy. Your remedy is not to strong arm your way in. That doesn't work that way. The legal system doesn't allow you to work that way. Well, at the end of the day, they know how they applied for that fake warrant of entry, right, by lying to the court, and also they didn't do it in front of a judge or a magistrate. They did it with an online order form, which is automatically issued by the computer, not an individual, right? So it's not, there's no contempt of court. So the only option they've truly got in law is to go back to the court and report it to the court. The court is saying, go and do that to them, right? And then they come back to the court and say, he didn't let me do that to them. And so you go, right, I've got some people here who've got the power to drag him in front of me, right, in handcuffs, and put him in front of me, so then he can explain why he didn't do as I said. Yeah, that's the official process. So when they're trying to strong arm their way and bully their way in, you say to them, no, 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 and you explain to the police officers this, right? Their duty now, their responsibility, is to go back to the court and report it to the judge or the magistrate, right? Report it back to the court and let the court follow the process that they've got available to them. If they may even send you officers out to arrest me, yeah, so be it. If that's how it is, then that's how it is. Yeah? But ultimately, you don't have a right to just force your way in. You don't have the right to let them force their way in. You're committing an offence, you're committing an offence. So you just lay it out like that, basically. And if you quoted Section 26 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, and you've also quoted the police attestation oath, then they know you've done some homework. They know you probably know an awful lot about it, more than they do. Okay? Any more questions?
So the promissory note of £50, it should be only £50?
It can be whatever you want, but you don't want to make it so much that it's worth them collecting on it. So if you said, well, I'm paying £500 a month now currently on my mortgage, I'm going to put £300 you can come and collect every month because I can afford £300, right? If it costs them £100 to collect on it, to pay an agent, to pay an agency, to pay an agent, yeah, and they're happy to entrust the original promissory note to them, right? That's going to cost them maybe up to about £100, I would say, right? Because as I say, they've got to pay their wages, they've got to pay for the use of the vehicle that they've got, to, the company vehicle that comes to your home, the fuel within the vehicle, all of that adds up, and the company's profits as well, the collection agent's profits. So let's say that's about £100 they would charge. A collection agency would charge them. If they're going to get £300 and pay out £100, they're £200 up, right? What you want to do is do it so it's £99 or £100. So yeah, you're going to pay £100 to collect £100. You're not going to. It's not going to be beneficial to you. Do you see what I mean? So as much as you can put on there to make it seem like to a judge, like I said, he's sitting on your shoulder there. Right? You're not talking to the claimant, you're talking to this imaginary judge. But in the future, you might have to talk to him for real and explain it, right? So you do everything in the manner that you're dealing with this judge. And you're saying to this judge, I created this note in good faith, I put as much as I could afford, right? Because if you said, I'll give you 17 pence a month, a judge is going to say that's ridiculous, yeah? And you're not acting in good faith at all. Right? So you've got to make them believe you are acting in good faith. And a debt can only be sought, right? The maximum amount that can be sought is only the amount that you can afford. Right? That's why a court gets involved to say what they declare. So normally you fill out a means tested form to say what your outgoings, income and outgoings are when you go to court, and the judge will look at that and say, well, I reckon he can afford this month. Right? So your declaration there is saying, this is what I can afford. Right? And that's acceptable to a court if it seems reasonable. And £50 a month is reasonable, I would argue. So they're never going to collect on it because it's going to cost them more than 50 quid too. Yeah, so they're never going to collect on it. But that's a good thing, right? For both parties, they don't lose anything because you created that money with your signature. That mortgage, when you signed it, you created that money into existence. They then added that to their bookkeeping, right? So a couple of £100,000 to their bookkeeping, right? Then they lend that to you. That money you've just created, they lend it to you and say, you've got to give it back to us, but you've got to pay interest. Or they'll say, no, you don't have to give it back to us, but you have to pay the interest on that money, right? As in an interest-only mortgage. So you carry on paying the mortgage or the interest rates. They know if you settle that amount disappears off their books, and they only get to keep what they collected in interest. Right? That's how debt works. That's how money works. As soon as the obligation has been completed, the money then goes, disappears, and only the interest exists. Okay? Yes?
I'm probably planning to do my first promissory note to pay off the water, pay the water bill. Have you heard much success with people doing the water through promissory notes?
Right, so I've never paid a water bill in my life.
Oh yeah.
Never paid a water bill in my life.
Have you heard of other people paying water?
I've heard of people saying they're going to pay their water bill with a promissory note, and my response to that is, why bother? Why bother? It's like paying your council tax with it. Why bother? Yeah, I didn't set up a contract for water. I never set up a contract for water. Right? I just used the water. Yeah? In the absence of the collection agents on behalf of the water board, in the absence of them, water's still going to come into my property, isn't it? So I don't have to have that bond and that contract with them. I just say, no, I'm just going to use the water. And your water's shit anyway, you know. I distill all of mine. All of my water, we go through, my house, we go through anywhere between 10 and 20 litres of distilled water a day. All my kids drink water, distilled water only. We cook with distilled water. And of course, it's very cheap for me because I don't pay for the energy. So distilling is not an issue. I have 2 distillers running all day long. And I have a water cooler, 18.5 litre water cooler, which I just top up the bottle with every time we distill water on tap for me. So their water's crap anyway, it's poison, it's full of all kinds of heavy metals and toxic shit, bleach, all kinds of stuff that I've no interest in drinking their water from the tap. And who gave them the government permission to sell the water company anyway in the first place? You know, it certainly wasn't me, so I've no interest. It's not secured on anything, they can't cut it off, not allowed to cut off your water supply unless there's a leak. And you'll find there's a little phishing tactic they use, right, to get people to correspond with them. They'll put a card through your door, it'll be a red coloured card, and saying, we don't have anybody here registered as, with an account with us. However, we can see that water is definitely being drawn from the system and we're concerned there may be a leak. So on this particular day, in 7 days' time, we're going to come out and we're going to cut the water supply for the leak. All it is a phishing tactic to get you to ring them in panic and go, oh my God, no, there is somebody living here. Fact is, when they come out to disconnect it, which they won't do, but if they did, it's illegal for them to disconnect it if they can clearly see there's people living at the property. Okay, it's against the law, right? So it then just becomes about an unsecured debt. Good luck getting that off me. Like I said, never paid one. Never ever in my life paid council tax, water, TV. I've never even, I told you earlier, I've never even lived in a household that has a TV licence. Yeah, my family have never had a TV licence. My mum, dad, never had one. My family never had one. My friends, they've never had one. We just don't entertain it. The TV licence are the easiest people in the world to deal with as well. They come to your door, they go, oh no, TV licence, show you the ID, you go, no thank you, not interested, shut the door, that's it. End of the situation, they walk away. The fools, the idiots, are the ones that stand there and think, I'm frozen to the spot, and I can't get this door shut. You know, I'm frozen here, I've been caught, I'm trapped. No, you're not. Just use your elbow a little bit. Just like that. Easy. Dead easy. We can all do it.
What I did with my one, my previous license, you've got an option at the way the word is, and let you think. If you're watching live TV, you need to get a license. But they need to tell them I don't watch live TV, and then every 2 years, that's it.
I don't even tell them that.
Yeah, I know, but this is before all this, so
Yeah.
obviously that happened, and I'm not going to sort of that, but it's how they word it, so as long as you're not watching TV and it's being shown, and no one does do that, like on Oadby, got EastEnders at 7:30.
I watch iPlayer for certain things, not really massive on TV, but it pops up. Yes, I have a TV licence, or no, I don't have a TV licence, and I go, yes, I have a TV licence, yeah, I've got one, yeah, sure I have, yeah, because it gets me access, yeah, but what have they done? What have they ever been able to do? Nothing. They can't come to me and go, oh, but you click that button to say, I'll go, no thank you, not interested. Shut the door. Simple as that. That's how you deal with them, with the least amount of energy, stress, anxiety as possible. Okay? You can pursue them for these obligations in the courts, but that's a lot of anxiety and stress and court filings and all kinds of, appearances and all bullshit. For what? For what? Ultimately, it's about getting rid of them. Now, if they want to make some kind of claim on you and drag you to court, now you can counterclaim. They paid for the claim already, right? So you don't have to pay out a fee to counterclaim. You just place in your counterclaim to the court and claim for their trespass at the same time, right? So you want to play that game, you want to drag me to court, I'll make a counterclaim against you on that case for the trespass, right? So it's there to use it, but ultimately, your ultimate aim, when they come banging on your door, right, is to get them to sod off and not come back again. Yeah. So as long as they do, don't worry about that. Don't worry about whether they accept it, ignore it, what they do with it. All that matters is that according to law, you have the right to refuse them entry. You have the right to remove them if you so desire. You have the right to cut off that clamp. You have the right to go about your business without them trespassing on your property because you have a sign up. Right? That's simply what it comes down to. In the absence of a sign, there is always an implied right of access. Everywhere. Everywhere.
Still got someone's up. I've still got my implied right of access.
Yeah.
They're still coming through whatever.
But also, even if, the bare minimum, you get rid of the chuggers, the charity muggers that come around wanting £3 a month, or telling you they want £3 a month. They want £300 a month is the honest answer. And, they'll call you up later that day, oh, could you up your payment? Look at this poor puppy, he's about to die. We need £20. So they're all scams, they're all scammers, but it's against the law for them to knock on a property that is clearly taken away implied rights of access, right? And they're all taught that. Now, of course, they have to be licensed, like a peddler's license, right, which they apply for through the police, in order to knock on your door in the first place, right? So, if they are found to have breached that law and called on your property when you've got a sign, these charity mockers, then they can lose their license. Simple as that, and they won't be given a license again. So they take it seriously. So even at the very least, you're not going to get hassled, especially in the summertime when they're around, as soon as if you sign up to one, you'll have them all flocking at your door. Yeah, exactly. Any more questions? Yes.
Just for the benefit of the audience, I asked you that question earlier for a friend. Sometimes they'll say that they lost the promissory note or they destroyed it.
Yeah.
As long as you fulfilled those 3 points that you said earlier, so it's recorded delivery, it's been witnessed, etc.
Yeah.
They can't do that, can they?
I mean, look, if you sent them a £50 note, bank note, right, Bank of England bank note, and they took a scan of it and then destroyed it, but then claimed you still owe them £50, right? Well, of course you don't, do you? They destroyed it, that's their fault, that's their problem, that's on them. You issued it in good faith, you signed it in good faith, you delivered it in good faith. The fact